¿Listo? Muy buenos días a todos. Espero que estén disfrutando de México, de Jalisco, de Zapopan. Mi nombre es Yolanda Martínez. Soy la titular de la Unidad de Gobierno Digital en la Secretaría de la Administración Pública. Y para mí es un gran placer estar el día de hoy aquí con ustedes en este segundo día de actividades del Foro de Gobernanza de Internet. Me permito recordarles que este es un espacio de diálogo, de compartir ideas. Es importante que todos entendamos lo que los demás nos comparten, por lo que los invito a utilizar los equipos de traducción que están disponibles para todos ustedes en el auditorio. We're going to be using different languages in this main session, so I make a kindly reminder that there are translator devices, although you have the transcript in English most of the time. But I just want to make sure that everyone can hear and be able to understand all participants' ideas and proposals. Los invito a participar activamente durante toda la sesión. Todas las ideas, inquietudes y reflexiones contribuyen a la discusión, a la generación de soluciones innovadoras, a conocer actores y proyectos con los que se puedan construir alianzas que nos permitan cerrar las brechas de acceso, uso y aprovechamiento en las tecnologías de información y en Internet. La sesión principal del día de hoy está dedicada a dialogar sobre desarrollo sostenible, Internet y crecimiento incluyente. Tendremos 3 bloques de intervenciones. Una enfocada al desarrollo de capacidades, otra a conversar sobre la inclusión de mujeres y niños y una más sobre el desarrollo de contenido local. El acceso a las tecnologías de información ha aumentado considerablemente en el mundo. Lamentablemente, no todos tienen oportunidad de participar. Ayer nos lo compartía el subsecretario general. Tenemos que trabajar mucho en equipo, la comunidad de Internet, las múltiples partes interesadas para asegurarnos que nadie se queda atrás de los beneficios de la sociedad de la información y del conocimiento. Al día de hoy se estima, de acuerdo a Naciones Unidas, que 53% de la población a nivel mundial carece de acceso a Internet. Esto es aproximadamente 3.900 millones de personas que siguen excluidos de sus beneficios. Aproximadamente 1 de cada 2 personas que no tienen acceso se encuentran en países en vías de desarrollo. 75% de los habitantes en África no tienen acceso a Internet, de acuerdo a la ITU, mientras que solo el 21% en el caso de Europa. Por lo tanto, las brechas también son regionales. En América Latina y el Caribe, 1/3 de la población no tiene acceso a Internet, por lo que tenemos un compromiso muy importante como región de trabajar en equipo, la comunidad de Internet, para asegurarnos que generamos ideas innovadoras para cerrar estas brechas. La brecha digital es también una brecha de género. El porcentaje de penetración de Internet es muchísimo más alto en hombres que en mujeres en todas las regiones del mundo, y más en África, con un 23% de diferencia entre acceso entre hombres y mujeres. De acuerdo con Global Kids Online de ITU, del total de usuarios de Internet, 1 de cada 3 es niño o una niña. Por lo tanto, tenemos una responsabilidad enorme de asegurarnos que el uso que le damos a un recurso tan importante como el Internet y las tecnologías es adecuado para toda la población. La adopción de servicios basados en TICs es la clave para alcanzar el cumplimiento de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Nosotros podemos hacer mucho para cerrar estas brechas y sobre todo para garantizar que la Agenda 2030 es accionable y es alcanzable si utilizamos al Internet y a las tecnologías como nuestros mejores habilitadores. Para esta sesión vamos a tener 2 moderadores, el doctor Youssef, CEO de Orego Telecom en Líbano, y el doctor Robert Pepper, de Global Connectivity en Facebook. Me permito cederle la palabra al doctor Pepper.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. So what we're going to do to try to make this as interactive as possible in the spirit of the Internet Governance Forum, even with the room structured the way it is, Dr. Youssef and I are going to take turns moderating from the stage, and then for the discussion, one of us will be in the audience to take your questions so that we can really make this interactive. We've designed this to be not long presentations, but for each of the sections, of the program, of the each subsection, we're going to have a set of lightning round presentations. 2, 3 minutes or 1.5 minutes. We've worked with the panelists. Some are going to present on one or another and sometimes multiple subsessions. So with that, let's get started. The first session, the first segment, is focusing on inclusion. And as Yolanda said, it's inclusion for women and youth, and there are wide disparities and wide gaps in gender use online, and therefore a gap in the benefits of being connected to the internet. So we're going to start. Actually, Yolanda, you're going to start. Okay. So you've already made your initial statement. So we're then going to we're going to start with Lenny Montiel, who's the at UNDESA as the Assistant Secretary General. And so it's great pleasure. And actually, we're here because of all the great work of UNDESA supporting the IGF. Thank you. Please.
Welcome, everybody. It is a great pleasure to join you here this morning. I mean, this is the second day of the meeting. This is the 11th meeting in which we are all together developing a new way of interacting about such an important issue as the Internet governance. Our exchange today can inform the critical ongoing debate about how Internet can contribute to inclusive growth and sustainable development. The sessions that you are going to participate in are fundamentally important for the implementation of the Agenda 2030. In fact, I recall participating last year's main session in João Pessoa on the same thing, and I applaud the organizers for creating linkages and continuing the multi-stakeholder debate between annual IGF sessions, because that provides the possibility of moving forward. Let me say that since last year, we have made positive strides towards fostering an environment in which the Internet is contributing positively to achieving the SDGs. However, many obstacles still remain, and unfortunately, digital divides continue to persist. One of the ambitious SDG targets is to achieve universal and affordable Internet access in LDCs, in least developed countries, by 2020. And in that respect, questions of inclusion of women and youth, local content, and capacity building are essential. If gaps persist between those who access the Internet's opportunities and those who do not, we won't be able to achieve the inclusive growth that we are all striving for. So the widening gap between developed and developing countries needs to be urgently addressed. We need to think together here at the IGF about how to create an enabling policy environment. We need to enhance international and multi-stakeholder cooperation to improve accessibility and affordability. Only by empowering young people and marginalized populations we will create an information society which truly enables inclusive growth. The development of skilled and engaged young people who can create local online content and e-services, for example, is essential. Let's call on policymakers everywhere to support professional skill development, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Digital literacy is needed for all citizens. We are already more than 1 year into the implementation period of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The high-level political forum on sustainable development some months ago took stock of our efforts. The IGA community can play an important role. You all represent important perspectives, representatives from government, civil society, the private sector, the UN system, and many other stakeholders. All three pillars of sustainable development, economic, social, and environment, need Internet as key catalyst. Internet connectivity and growth can be used to accelerate economic development by facilitating e-commerce. It can move social development forward by overcoming critical obstacles such as social exclusion. All of these challenges make our deliberations, capacity building efforts, and cooperation within the IGF so crucial. To bring about inclusive growth and thriving digital economy will require a focused effort from all of us. I wish you a great success with this session. Thank you.
So we're now going to jump into the first of our subsessions on inclusion. And Yolanda, this is where you are going to now do your intervention on inclusion in addition to having welcomed us. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Siguiendo lo que hemos compartido el día de hoy, yo me permití compartir con ustedes algo a lo que le dedico más del 100% de mi tiempo, mi energía. Es algo que hago con muchísima convicción y dedicación. Soy la responsable de hacer accionable muchas de las iniciativas de la Estrategia Digital Nacional y de las más importantes es la digitalización de los servicios del gobierno. Creo firmemente que el Internet y las tecnologías de información son el elemento con mayor potencial de reducir brechas. Latinoamérica se caracteriza por ser una región del mundo sumamente desigual. Tenemos muchísimos Méxicos, como lo expresó la licenciada Lagunes, y la única manera de hacer nuestra sociedad más equitativa, de distribuir mejor la riqueza y de generar mejores oportunidades de desarrollo para todos, es garantizando que todas las personas tengan acceso equitativo a los servicios del gobierno. El ejemplo que escogí para esta sesión es el de Lupita. Lupita es una madre soltera, jefa de familia, que pudo acceder a un seguro gratuito que el gobierno le concede en caso de que ella llegue a faltar, sus hijos tengan la manutención garantizada hasta que terminen sus estudios. Este es un servicio que es responsabilidad del Ministerio de Desarrollo Social y que está dentro de nuestras prioridades en materia de digitalización. Hoy el trámite se puede hacer 100% en línea, desde cualquier lugar del mundo, mientras haya un acceso a Internet, un dispositivo y sobre todo mientras Lupita sepa que ese servicio está disponible para ella y mientras Lupita sepa utilizar la computadora para poder meter sus datos, para poder llenar un formulario, para poder enviarlo y para poder tener esa certeza de que si ella llega a faltar, el Estado tiene un programa para garantizar la continuidad de los estudios de sus hijos. Este ejemplo lo que nos permite es transmitirles que para poder garantizar un desarrollo inclusivo tenemos que trabajar en equipo. El gobierno trabaja con toda la convicción de digitalizar los servicios más demandados por la sociedad absolutamente en todos los sectores. Es nuestro compromiso que el 100% de los servicios federales se puedan realizar 100% en línea, porque es la manera más eficiente que tenemos de democratizar su acceso. No es únicamente que sean gratuitos, es que las personas sepan que tienen ese derecho, es que las personas sepan utilizar la tecnología para hacer efectivo ese derecho y sobre todo para beneficiarse de muchísimos programas sociales que están a su disposición y que muchas veces no saben. Las tecnologías de información y el Internet son un catalizador enorme, pero tienen que traducirse en mejorar las condiciones de vida de las personas. No basta con tener acceso si las personas no saben utilizar el Internet, no saben utilizar las tecnologías para que ese acceso signifique mejores en sus condiciones de desarrollo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, and thank you for being exactly on time. So we're just reminding the speakers that there's a countdown clock over there, and that's great. And again, another great example of what we're trying to do is look at very specific things and examples of success stories so that at the end of each session, our rapporteurs are going to draw out some of the really good practices that we've heard. I don't believe that there's anything called a best practice because we have a menu of a lot of good practices. And so we're looking for really concrete, great examples in each one of these discussion areas that we can learn from and then make available to everybody. Raul Echeverria from ISAC, you're next. Thank you for, we were on an earlier panel together and he made it, so that's great. Raul.
Thank you very much. I think that I have 1 minute and a half, so it's challenging. I think that we need to work on capacity building across many different areas. for really connecting everybody, but connecting in a meaningful way. This is building capacities on deploying infrastructure, on using infrastructure, for participating meaningfully in the internet governance debate, but mainly we need to build capacities for using the internet for the benefit of the life of the people. And this is why I think that we cannot speak about capacity building without speaking about empowering communities. And we have seen that in all our work across the world, especially in the works that we do with the community networks, where we deploy the networks, we build capacities for the people building their own networks, for learning how to use the internet, but also for working on learn how to use the internet, for increase their incomes, for having access to best services, for improving their lives, for building an internet really of opportunities. And this is why I say that in this era we have to talk about building capacities and empowering communities as one common thing. Thank you.
Next, Gabriela. Oh, by the way, for everybody, we can do just introduce yourself very briefly. The bios are online, so we don't want to use a lot of time. But yeah, just if everybody could just introduce themselves as you start. Thank you, Gabriela.
Great. Hola, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Gabriela Rocha, soy directora ejecutiva de una organización que se llama Laboratoria, aquí en México. Laboratoria, lo que hacemos es que empoderamos a mujeres jóvenes con limitaciones económicas, brindándoles acceso a una educación de calidad y oportunidades de trabajar como desarrolladoras web en el sector digital. Como Yolanda bien lo mencionó, lamentablemente nuestra región todavía es una región muy desigual y las mujeres están sobrerepresentadas en una población desfavorecida. Entonces las mujeres, todavía entre los jóvenes que no estudian y no trabajan, las mujeres representan el 70% de esa población. Todavía 1 en cada 3 mujeres no tiene ingresos propios, lo que significa un sinfín de problemas, obviamente, desde violencia hasta que sus futuros literalmente están en las manos de los demás, ¿no? Y eso es un problema porque no tienen independencia económica. Y al mismo tiempo que tenemos esta problemática social muy grave, existe una oportunidad enorme en el sector digital. La industria de tecnología es la industria que más crece actualmente en Latinoamérica y felizmente para ser desarrollador no necesitas necesariamente un título, necesitas saber programar. Entonces eso abre un sinfín de oportunidades para una población que lamentablemente todavía no tiene acceso a educación superior de calidad. Lamentablemente la educación superior de calidad sigue siendo un lujo en Latinoamérica para muchas personas. Entonces, lo que decidimos hacer en el laboratorio fue cerrar esta brecha entre esta problemática social del talento de millones de jóvenes, de mujeres jóvenes que está siendo desperdiciado simplemente porque no tienen acceso a buenas oportunidades de educación y todo este potencial enorme en el sector digital. Entonces lo que hacemos es seleccionamos mujeres talentosas donde nadie más lo está buscando, las formamos en desarrollo web durante 6 meses en una educación innovadora, en una metodología educativa innovadora que es ágil y accesible para nuestras alumnas. Ellas solo pagan después del programa. Una vez que nosotros ya las colocamos en empleos de calidad y están trabajando como desarrolladoras, ganando 3 veces más en promedio de lo que ganaban antes. Empezamos en Perú hace más o menos 2 años y ahorita ya estamos en México y Chile también, con ganas de venir a Jalisco. Estamos por ahora solo en el DF y la idea es venir a Guadalajara en los próximos 6 meses. Y solo quiero dejarles en mis últimos 25 segundos con, creo que algo maravilloso de lo que hemos descubierto en este proceso es el hecho de que es posible que una mujer que no tiene educación formal, tiene limitaciones económicas y no tiene ninguna experiencia trabajando con tecnología, pueda en 6 meses ser programadora, contribuir con su talento y diversidad en el sector y contribuir con la transformación de ella y su familia. Entonces, que pensemos en eso cuando hablemos de inclusión de las mujeres y de los jóvenes. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And that's actually a great segue into Dr. Liu from China, because we're just hearing about women becoming developers, right, web developers, and Dr. Liu is, one of the people leading some of the science and technology in China. So, Dr. Liu.
Thank you. I'm a member of consultative committee on ICT for UN Chinese Association for Science and Technology and the professor of Chinese Academy of Sciences. Thank you for providing me such opportunity to address issues of the woman and the Internet. Perhaps very few countries like China in the world, the lady plays a so important role in the Internet's history. 20 years ago, very few people in China knew the Internet. No one else understood why China needed the Internet, but she did. In order to bring the Internet to China, she communicated with government officers, chief engineers, private sector leaders, and once again. And finally, the first TCP/IP established in China in 1997. Then she led the first Internet program and founded the Internet Society of China. She served as the society as a president. She was a member of ICANN, International Domain Name Communities, and a member of Working Group of Internet Governance. She also was chairperson of the China National Committee for Codata. She is a pioneer of Internet of China. She is recognized as the Internet Hall of Fame Global Connector. The Internet history told us she changed China. Up to the end of last year, 2015, there are 688 million people, Chinese people, using the Internet, in which almost 200 million people in the countryside. And they use the Internet, improved their lives, and most of them achieving the poverty-free. Ladies and gentlemen, the name of the lady is Madame Qiheng Hu. Madame Hu, like a mother, not only she is the mother of the Internet of China, she has been dedicated herself to the Internet with her profound knowledge, rich talents, full of enthusiasm, and all her love to the Internet. She got me to come back to China after I got good training in America, and to dedicate to data sharing using the Internet. Madame Hu is an example of ladies in the Internet society. She is an example of mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was inspiring. Daniel.
Hola a todos, soy Daniel, soy subsecretario de Gobierno Digital de la Argentina. 62% de los hogares en la Argentina tienen conexión a Internet, lo cual quiere decir que el 38% no. Para peor, 20% de los jóvenes entre 20 y 29 años no terminan el secundario y solo el 18% y 7 de cada 10 no terminan la universidad. La Argentina está haciendo un montón de cosas desde el Estado y sobre todo también desde la sociedad civil para trabajar a favor de la inclusión, sobre todo lo que tiene que ver con mujeres y jóvenes. Podemos nombrar ejemplos como Chicas en Tecnología y ADA, que son dos organizaciones civiles que acercan la tecnología a las mujeres a lo que es programación y a lo que es las carreras de ciencia. Podemos hablar de Arbusta como una ONG que genera empoderamiento de jóvenes en situación de pobreza, hombres y mujeres, y les enseña habilidades de testing, de desarrollo, y trabajan junto con diferentes compañías donde ellos tercerizan sus trabajos de testing sobre estas organizaciones, dándoles un trabajo digno. Desde el Estado, en lo que ellas hacen, damos y enseñamos cursos de programación, venta online y desarrollo de habilidades basadas en Internet, buscando empoderar a las mujeres en generar un trabajo y sobre todo en tener acceso a conocimiento, y trabajamos con el área educativa en generar skills de programación y emprendedorismo en las escuelas, buscando construir los trabajos del futuro, entendiendo que la matriz productiva de la Argentina está cambiando de ser un productor de carne y granos a un productor de servicios. Gracias.
Thank you, and thank you for being right on time. Edmund Chung.
Thank you. This is Edmund from .Asia. And my colleagues have already talked about some of the items about youth and the digital divide. It's sometimes strange, actually, especially in the developed world, to think about youth when we talk about inclusion, because really they're at the forefront of the internet. Not, we don't need to bring them in. They're already in. They're probably more in than we are. And but one of the things that is important is about ownership. I think in terms of ownership and empowerment, which I think is a very critical element in leading into inclusion. And here at IGF, I guess one of the aspects is about youth participation in internet governance and policy development for the internet's own future. And that empowerment, I think, is important. But just being open doors, I mean, the doors are open. And if you look around you, the youth here, there is a lot of youth here which has been built around over the years, but they need also capacity building. Somebody needs to bring them in. And that is part of the empowerment that is important in terms of youth inclusion as well. So two things really to actually empower youth inclusion is the capacity building to allow them to actually effectively participate in internet governance, and also the ownership, having a sense of being able to influence the policies, not just having them around and teaching them what we know about the internet, but actually allowing these digital natives to have a say in our internet policies in the future. I think that's important in terms of inclusion. Thank you.
Really good point. It's about not just educating. It's actually about integrating and the collaboration, bringing people into the process so that they are participants and affecting the future, because it's their future. Eileen, from Cuba. Please.
Buenos días. Muchas gracias a los organizadores del panel por invitarnos a participar. Vengo a nombre de la sociedad civil cubana organizada recientemente, la Sociedad Civil de las Tecnologías, la Información y las Comunicaciones en la Unión de Informáticos de Cuba. Es una joven organización de la sociedad civil que agrupa a los profesionales del sector de las tecnologías de la información y las comunicaciones para integrar y potenciar sus capacidades innovadoras e impactar en el desarrollo de nuestro país, reforzando valores ya alcanzados de ser una sociedad centrada en la persona, integradora y orientada al desarrollo. Esta organización reconoce que no es posible alcanzar las metas de la sociedad de la información con esfuerzos aislados. Es necesario desarrollar modelos inclusivos de integración donde la sociedad civil juega un rol importante, en el que todos los actores logremos discutir y actuar más en cómo usar las TIC e Internet para transformar la vida cultural, política, social y económica de los países en desarrollo, y no tanto en términos de explotación y dominio. Es por eso que resulta importante que los proyectos, iniciativas y políticas que se propongan se hagan teniendo en cuenta las diferentes realidades, capacidades y niveles de desarrollo de los territorios y los grupos más desfavorecidos, respetando las políticas y prioridades de las naciones, así como su independencia y soberanía. Desde la creación de la Unión de Informáticos de Cuba hemos implementado varias acciones para tributar a, como dijera Fidel, conectarnos al conocimiento y participar en una verdadera globalización de la información que signifique compartir y no excluir. Fin de la cita. Esto no ha resultado difícil en los inicios. Los factores que pueden influir y promover el uso seguro, correcto e inclusivo de las TIC y de Internet se han desarrollado en Cuba en los últimos 50 años. Todos sabemos leer y escribir. Tenemos derecho al acceso, niños, mujeres, ancianos, discapacitados. Se enseña el idioma inglés desde los primeros años de educación pública y gratuita de la que disfrutamos. Idioma de Internet, a pesar de no ser la lengua nativa más hablada. El nivel de instrucción y de cultura general es muy alto, así como la garantía de los espacios para continuar desarrollándola. Y existe una voluntad expresa de nuestro gobierno de potenciar el uso de Internet y de las tecnologías que no ha podido llevarse a cabo en toda su magnitud por el bloqueo económico al que somos sometidos. Algunas de estas acciones que desarrollamos desde la Unión de Informáticos de Cuba las compartimos a continuación muy sintéticamente y que se profundizan en un panel que tenemos mañana a las 4:30 de la tarde. La ciudad mira sus ríos es un proyecto de la ciudad de Camagüey en el que se concretan acciones educativas para la utilización creativa y en bien comunitario de servicios TIC en función de elevar su calidad de vida en armonía con el ambiente. Desarrollamos concursos donde se premian ideas innovadoras de las TIC en los que se potencian la participación de equipos de mujeres. Espacios de instrucción y capacitación como los Viernes TIC, el Taller TIC para el Desarrollo Sostenible, Taller de Tecnologías Educativas desde la UIC, acompañados de sábados de software donde compartimos gobierno, academia, empresas, sector no estatal y población en general con las tecnologías como pretexto. Festivales y ferias de tecnología donde se exhiben aplicaciones nacionales, se dan charlas temáticas, se realizan encuentros con niños y jóvenes, donde se entrenan habilidades para el uso correcto de las tecnologías y de Internet. Todos juntos cierran un ciclo en el que cada 2 años desarrollaremos nuestro evento internacional Cibersociedad, el primero en octubre del 2017, y que ubica el horizonte en el 2030, enfocándose a qué debemos enfrentar y hacer hoy en materia de TIC para construir el futuro próspero y sostenible soñado. La UIC se propone ser un espacio dinámico y productivo para el diálogo y la acción, en el que los diferentes sectores sociales logren sensibilizar, informar, educar y movilizar a la sociedad para promover el uso correcto de las tecnologías de la información y la comunicación. Desde este espacio buscaremos e implementaremos activamente alternativas concretas y coherentes que apoyarán en el proceso de lograr un desarrollo próspero y sostenible y se consoliden aún más todos los logros en el ámbito de justicia social alcanzados por nuestra patria desde enero de 1959. Soñemos y actuemos. Un futuro mejor es posible.
Gracias. Gracias. I apologize up here. We got a little bit out of order, but we actually, so up here from Egypt has a really interesting perspective, broadening it from its women, youth, but also people with special needs to be included up here.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I work as an advisor to the Minister of Communications and Information Technology in Egypt. Yes, we all believe and agree on the importance of the inclusion of women and youth. However, I believe that special attention should be paid to the inclusion of women, youth, and every person with disability who are subjected to double discrimination, as they are not given equal opportunities to earn income and therefore have, in most cases, lower standards of living. Adding gender discrimination, unfortunately, women with disabilities suffer from multiple layers of discrimination. Realizing that, the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology in Egypt puts the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities on the top of its agenda. And within this context, we launched many projects, including the development of Egypt's ICT and Internet accessibility policy in cooperation with the ITU, developing web-based assistive technologies which supported the Arabic language, train and employ persons with disabilities at the ICT sector, providing access to Internet assistive technologies to all special education schools and public universities. Only 2 weeks ago, we launched the Arab Regional ICT Center for Persons with Disabilities in cooperation with the ITU. Actually, I can go for hours, but I would like to give you a feel of the real world through a short video that I think my colleagues here will run. Thank you.
قصتنا بتبدأ من وزارة الاتصالات وتكنولوجيا المعلومات.
وزارة الاتصالات وتكنولوجيا المعلومات أطلقت استراتيجيتها لتمكين ذوي الإعاقة في سنة 2012. نشارك فيها ممثلين لذوي الإعاقات المختلفة من المحافظات المختلفة. الاستراتيجية بشكل عام بتركز على إتاحة المعلومات لذوي الإعاقة والتعليم والتدريب وإتاحة الفرص العلاجية بشكل ميسر ليهم.
وزارة الاتصالات طبعا بطرحها فكرة المبادرة ديت دعمت المجتمع وحفزته على ان هو يفكر في اتجاه ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة.
العالم فيه أكتر من بليون من ذوي الإعاقة، منهم 55 مليون في وطننا العربي. علشان كده وزارة الاتصالات جهزت مشروع كبير علشان تطور مهاراتهم وتساعدهم على مهارات استخدام تكنولوجيا المعلومات لدمجهم بشكل كامل في المجتمع وتمكينهم من العمل بشكل طبيعي واكتشاف مواهب وقدرات فيهم ما كانتش مستغلة.
احنا هدفنا من برنامج او استراتيجية الوزارة بناء انسان متكامل عنده استقلالية قادر على الدمج في المجتمع.
منظومة التواصل في المرحلة الأولى 4 تطبيقات. أول تطبيق منهم هو قاموس الإشارة، وده خاص بالكلمات فوكابلري أو مجمع من الكلمات العربية مقابلها الإشاري بالفيديو. ومعاها صور توضيحية لمعاني الكلمات، وده تعليمي وتدريبي للصم وغير الصم.
وزارة الاتصالات لأنها كانت على دراية كاملة بالاحتياجات الفعلية لهؤلاء الطلاب، لأن يعني أعتقد أن مركز أو القسم الخدمات المجتمعية اللي في الوزارة دارس كويس قوي قوي نفسية واحتياجات هؤلاء الطلاب.
أنا عايز أشتغل في الشغلانة اللي أنا حاببها والحاجة اللي أنا حاببها.
أنا كان نفسي أشتغل في مجال اللغات والترجمة وكده.
أنا نفسي أطلع مدرس وأكون مدرس كمبيوتر، لأن أنا بحب الكمبيوتر جدا بصراحة.
هي النجاح إنك تحقق اللي اجتمع الناس كله عن كونه مستحيل، ده النجاح بجد.
كمبيوتر أولا في الفصل أنا كنت فرحان بس أنا أتعلم منه حروف
تست كمبيوتر كنت مبسوط، تعلمت حاجات جديدة.
بدأنا المشوار ولسه قدامنا كتير، وطول ما في أمل مع بعض هنعيش حياة أفضل.
The microphone, there we go. Thank you very much. That was actually great because it shows not just, we were earlier discussing inclusion into the internet, but this is using the internet for inclusion, right? And we need to look at both sides of that. And so that was, it's really moving. And so really thank you for presenting that. We're going to come back one more time to Raul. Last night we were working on the schedule, and Raul actually thought that he was addressing one of the later sessions on capacity building, but Raul also wanted to address and contribute to the discussion on inclusion of women and youth. So Raul, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Bob. We need, if we want to include women more women on the internet should be relevant for women. And at this moment, the percentage of IT jobs that are held by women in the world is decreasing. And the contents are mainly developed by men. So it is clear that we need women to be technology developers and also content developers. Every project in the Internet Society has a gender perspective, and we have some projects especially addressing those needs, like the ones that we have in Africa. That's how we are training women to acquire the basic technology skills for getting jobs in the IT industry. And with regard to youth, I think that's what is basic is connecting the children and the schools. We always speak about connecting the schools, but what is really important is connect all the children around the world. And just one final comment on a very nice project that we run in partnership with CGI Brazil, and this year also in partnership with the government of Mexico and .mx. That is the youth program that we run here in IGF. This year we brought together those three organizations with the government of Mexico and CGI. We are more than 80 youth. That's you will have the opportunity to see all of them in every session during the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. So we're going to open this up now for questions. Dr. Yosef, and we have the microphone, so if you want to contribute, please just let us know. We want to keep the contributions, the interventions, to about 1 minute because we want an opportunity for as many people as possible. There's somebody over here. One of the issues, we heard a lot about the efforts to bring women into the tech industry, the mother of the internet in China. That was a wonderful story. Coding, Gabrielle. But there's some other issues maybe we also want to address, which is the earlier, Yolanda, you talked about it, which is the disparity on using the internet. In many countries, the percentage of women and girls using the internet versus men or boys, males, is just very wide, right? And so why is that, and what can we do about closing that gap in addition to closing the gap on the development side, the technology side, the coding side, right? So we need to, I think, address both of those gaps when we're talking about the gender gap. Over here, turn on Dr. Yosef's microphone, please. Yeah, I don't think the mic was working. Hold on. Could you, yeah.
Bueno, mi nombre es Jesús González, yo vengo de Reynosa, Tamaulipas, y antes que todo quisiera felicitarlos a todos ustedes por la gran labor que ustedes desempeñan. Yo en el año del 2000 estaba ingresando a la secundaria y en ese entonces era muy difícil romper esa brecha digital. Eran solo unos cuantos los que podían tener acceso a una computadora. Yo estaba estudiando la secundaria y me acuerdo que cuando mis primeras tareas, el Instituto Mexicano de la Juventud nos acercó a través de los cibercafés esa gran capacidad y esa gran oportunidad de poder aprender. Entonces, pues yo creo que somos historias de éxito gracias a las políticas que ustedes representan. Tal vez el nerviosismo nos gana, ¿verdad? Pero yo quiero pedirles que no pierdan la fe y la esperanza en la juventud. Aun cuando las redes sociales y todo el mundo está en contra de los jóvenes seguimos queriendo crecer y queremos que el mundo evolucione a través de las TICs. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. That's great.
This one. Ok. Une fois de plus, je vous remercie. Je réponds au nom de Abdeljalil Bacharbon. Je suis du Tchad. C'est un bon panel parce qu'on parle de développement durable, on parle de l'Internet et on parle, c'est-à-dire la croissance durable aussi. Quels sont les conseils que vous nous donnez en tant que jeunes, c'est-à-dire pour atteindre l'objectif de développement durable via l'Internet? Et vous avez parlé de renforcement des capacités. Est-ce que après ce forum, on aura un grand programme de renforcement des capacités des jeunes et des femmes dans le monde? Parce que je sais qu'à ISOC, à ICANN, ils ont le programme de fellowship. Mais comment renforcer? Parce que vous parlez des jeunes, mais il faut réellement des projets des jeunes. Donc, il nous faut des projets réels. Donc, via ces forums, on voulait que vous dites, écoutez, dans chaque pays, on prend chaque année des jeunes dans les panels, par exemple de IGF, parce que ce que je vois ici, il n'y a pas de jeunes dans les panels. Donc, vous voulez réellement l'implication des jeunes. Dans chaque panel, mettons des jeunes, montrons-leur les bons chemins. Et je vous remercie. Quoi.
Great suggestion.
Peter.
Great suggestion. So why don't we do this? I can probably.
Dear Peter, here we have a lot of requests of interrogation.
Yeah.
So here.
No,
I have.
So there,
okay.
And then there's somebody, Dr. Yosef, right in front of you,
okay.
to your other side.
Take my friend.
And then we're going to move to do here, and then we'll move to the other side of the room. Okay.
Sí, buenos días. Mi nombre es Carlos Francisco Vidal Flores. Vengo de parte de la Universidad de Guadalajara. Soy licenciado en Negocios Internacionales y soy futuro aspirante a la maestría de Tecnologías de Información. ¿Por qué la relación en negocios internacionales? Bueno, ya lo comentaron ustedes, es una buena herramienta para poder iniciar buenos negocios sin invertir tanto en algunos ambientes. Pero bueno, mi pregunta va enfocada al ambiente y al entorno mexicano. ¿Cómo uno como empresario potencial, por así decirlo, en esta área de las TICs, cómo puede traspolar pues todas los inconvenientes que existen en México para poder desarrollar una empresa? Y en el caso de todas las startups que están yendo hacia abajo por cuestiones de sustentabilidad o de problemas económicos, pues no sé, a lo mejor el IVA, el ICR, todo este tipo de detalles, ¿cómo se está llevando a cabo la estructura? Porque sí va muy enfocada la parte a educar a la población, a educarlo más a esa rama, pero ¿qué se está haciendo para poder desarrollar la industria como tal y que no sea nada más, de algunos actores empresarios aquí en México, ¿no?
Thank you. Yeah. So Thank you. So what we're going to do is collect a number of these questions and then come back. So that'd be great. We'll move to... So why don't we pick up maybe 2 more comments and then we'll come back up to the panel. So somebody over here on this side. Dr. We're going here first. Okay, good.
Hello, my name is Patricia Contreras. Bueno, en español, perdón. Mi pregunta va para Gabriela Rocha. ¿Cuáles son los retos, los obstáculos a los que el laboratorio se ha tenido que enfrentar? 1, para capacitar o educar mujeres, y 2, para educarlas en un ámbito que lastimosamente para muchos es un ámbito o un área todavía masculina.
Okay, so we're going to come to Gabriela to some questions, and then we'll come back to more questions. But for the people asking questions, if you could also stand up so that the camera can see you, because we're doing this remote online as well. Actually, what we're going to do is have there's some questions if you'd like to answer them. We'll then go to a remote question to see if there's any questions remotely, and then we'll come back over here for the questions in the room. So please, if there's anybody that wants to respond to any of the points made so far.
Pues si quieren puedo empezar respondiendo la pregunta. ¿Cómo te llamabas, María? Patti, mucho gusto. Sí, obviamente hay muchos retos, ¿no? Una de las cosas que nosotros aprendimos y es lo que nos motiva mucho es justamente esto, que el hecho de que hay mucho potencial, hay mujeres brillantes que simplemente por falta de acceso a oportunidades se quedan fuera, digamos, de la economía formal, se quedan fuera de oportunidades de movilidad social para ellas y sus familias. Entonces, en el laboratorio tenemos un proceso de selección donde estamos tratando de identificar estas mujeres con mucho potencial y con mucho talento dentro de esta población. Entonces, ha sido maravilloso enseñarlas que formen parte de este programa porque son muy capaces, ¿no? Y aprenden muy rápido. Los retos en muchos casos tienen que ver por un lado con su contexto social y por otro lado luego platico del segundo punto que mencionaste una vez que ya están en el trabajo, ¿no? Con respecto al contexto social, nosotros todavía enfrentamos muchos de los temas de discriminación que las mujeres enfrentan en Latinoamérica, ¿no? Entonces, en nuestro programa, nuestras alumnas se empiezan a empoderar porque están en un ámbito de puras mujeres y se empiezan a ver que son capaces, que pueden lograr lo que quieran, que el cielo es el límite para ellas. Y de pronto sus esposos a veces se empiezan a sentir amenazados, ¿no? Y empiezan a dejar de que ellas tengan la libertad que les va a permitir ser exitosas en el programa y después tener trabajo. También muchas veces todavía no tenemos una sociedad que facilita las condiciones necesarias para que la mujer pueda dejar su hogar y dedicarse a su educación y a su trabajo, ¿no? Entonces, muchas son madres solteras, por ejemplo, y no tienen las condiciones necesarias para que ellas puedan dedicarse 100% a eso. Entonces, esos son los retos que nosotros enfrentamos y que de manera muy personalizada con cada una de nuestras alumnas tratamos de atender para evitar que ellas no tengan esta oportunidad. Y por el lado del trabajo, nosotros hemos tenido mucha suerte porque, como les decía, hay tanta demanda en el sector digital que las empresas están buscando talento. Y cuando ven que hay un programa donde hay un montón de mujeres súper preparadas, listas para trabajar, realmente se suman y abren sus puertas a ellas. Y las empresas empiezan a comentar de cómo ha sido mucho mejor para ellos tener a más mujeres en sus equipos, porque la diversidad trae mayor creatividad, mayor innovación, ya no se vuelve el famoso club de Toby, ¿no? Puros hombres en los equipos de desarrollo. Entonces creo que cuanto más trabajamos en este ámbito, más las empresas empiezan a dar cuenta de los beneficios para ellos y hemos tenido felizmente muy pocos problemas con nuestras alumnas en ese ambiente masculino en el trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you. Raul, did you want to just have a real quick?
Yes, first point is that I come from an organization that is led by a woman, and so that we have half of our executive team meeting are women, and half of our staff, more or less, are women too. And so this is about leading by example. And one silent work we do is in many places around the world, we identify entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. We bring them together. We help them to promote them in their communities, and we see now that many of the women that have participated in those meetings around the world now in leadership positions, and some of them are here. And same with youth. Many of the people that have participated, people between 18 and 85 years old that have participated in the last year in the youth program in IGF, now they are back here by their own because they have leadership positions in different organizations in this field. So I think it's about work and leading by example.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for remote participation? Nothing yet. Okay, but again, Timmy, if there is, you just wave at me. You'll have the question sign. Okay, yes, Yolanda, please.
Solo para contestar la pregunta de nuestro compañero de la Universidad de Guadalajara, yo también soy una orgullosa egresada de la Universidad de Guadalajara y efectivamente este año hubo una reforma muy importante para acelerar el proceso de creación de empresas. A partir de octubre de este año, en GOP.mx, la constitución de una empresa se hace 100% en Internet, es gratuito y se tiene que realizar por ley en menos de 24 horas. Entonces, con mucho gusto podemos conversar después del panel porque es parte de este compromiso de democratizar el acceso gratuito de los servicios que permitan generar mayores oportunidades de emprendimiento utilizando Internet.
Thank you. Our host, Lenny Montiel, has to leave now, unfortunately, but I want to just, before you leave, I just thank you very, very much. I really appreciated all the work that you've done so that we're here, but also your comments, and I know how busy you are, that you are actually able to stay with us for a full hour. So thank you very, very much, and I just wanted to thank you before you had to leave. Thanks. Back over here for a couple more questions. So we'll go here, and then thank you for standing, and then is there another question down here? Again, so we'll do here and then here. Thank you. And then all the way in the back, but I want to, yes, we'll do here, here, and then there. Good, thank you.
Buenos días. Buenos días. Soy Iván Barreto de la Asociación de Maestros de Cuba. Decía Séneca que no hay viento favorable para el que no sabe a dónde va. Y pienso que en los temas de Internet, tal vez los objetivos de desarrollo 2030 nos pueden dar un norte hacia dónde tenemos que llevar esta idea de cómo llegar con Internet a todos. Y pienso que entonces, en los mismos objetivos, aunque tenemos algunas deudas con las metas todavía de Dakar 2015, donde todavía en muchos países no hemos logrado concretar procesos de educación, de inclusión, como nos hemos propuesto, y bueno, los objetivos del 2030 para algunos países han hecho posponer estas metas. Realmente en los dos casos hay algo en que coinciden, es la necesidad de ganar al ejército de maestros para lograr que realmente Internet no sea por Internet, o sea, no nos están llamando a conectar solo Internet, sino Internet para un objetivo específico, la formación de los niños, de los jóvenes, la participación. Y por tanto, esa deuda 2015 que tenemos, que vamos a arrastrar hasta el 2030, tienen que ser las metas donde también entonces la Internet juegue un papel importante como herramienta para ganar el objetivo final, que es ese, lograr el desarrollo humano posible. En el caso de Cuba, sí hemos apostado a que los maestros formen parte de esas políticas para lograr que realmente la Internet esté en función del desarrollo humano. La pregunta entonces es cómo se conciben estos proyectos que tal vez impactan en el orden local, pero cómo estamos influyendo en que las políticas de gobierno realmente reconozcan que la Internet tiene que favorecer procesos de formación integral, de inclusión total, y no sea el objetivo per se, sino el camino, uno más, una de las vías para lograr realmente el desarrollo pleno de los niños y los jóvenes que parten de la educación. Es imposible navegar en educación si no sabemos remar, al menos en el alfabeto, y mantenemos los niveles de analfabetismo en el mundo, mantenemos niveles de exclusión por el trabajo a los niños que ponemos a trabajar desde pequeños, y sin embargo Internet evidentemente tiene que llegar a apoyar estos procesos que son de base para lograr realmente una inclusión en las redes.
Gracias. Thank you. So we're coming up towards the close of this session, but I do want to take some of the questions that we've already said. So we're going to do this. Next one will be right here. We'll go to the back and we'll do one more from over here. And you had your hand raised from the very beginning, so we'll do that. So we have 1, 2, 3, and I think we're pretty much out of time. No, we have time. We're okay? Okay. So yeah, so we'll do 1, 2, 3, and then 4 will be over here. Thank you. But try to keep your intervention short so that we can get as many in as possible. Thank you.
My name is Zaina Abu Harb from Lebanon. SDG 5 calls for empowering women and girls and to achieve gender equality. In my country, Lebanon, we might not have a problem in building capacities, as well as offering equal access to study, especially ICT topics. But maybe what is needed everywhere, not only in Lebanon, is to have companies recruiting more women and at all levels. Is it possible to have ICT companies set a target, let's say, of X% female as a global workforce? I think this might be a good step towards achieving the inclusion of women in the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the back over here, then we will move to this side.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días. Asael Fernández de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Bueno, solo he escuchado que todos hablan de dar Internet para todos, pero no se trata nada más de dar Internet por dar Internet, sino también hay que educar a ser usuarios conscientes, que no se vuelva un vicio, los efectos de salud. Yo no he visto a nadie que hable de eso. Estoy viendo aquí todas las personas que están trabajando, por ejemplo, todos están agachados, el efecto en los cuellos, todo eso. Entonces tenemos que trabajar y pedir trabajar con las organizaciones que desarrollen dispositivos que sean más adecuados, más ergonómicos, para que los efectos de salud no sean después un problema, y por querer dar y querer conectar a todos a Internet, no se trabajó a tiempo para educarlos adecuadamente, las cuestiones de salud, de seguridad, que no compartan sus datos. Entonces todo eso tenemos que reforzar, y ese sería mi comentario. Gracias.
Thank you. And again, let me clarify. We're not ending the session. The session's going on. It's this discussion topic, and then we're going to move on to the next discussion topic. So we have a little bit of time here. So please, thank you. And yeah, you raised your hand from the very beginning. Sorry, so please.
Muy buenos días. Me disculpan, estoy un poco afónica. Pero creo que es importante porque es poco el tiempo para decir todo lo que se ha hecho desde Cuba. Asistimos a este evento con la plataforma de la sociedad civil organizada que tiene aprobado, y lo puedo adosar aquí, el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo Económico y Social hasta el 2030, visión de la nación, ejes y sectores estratégicos. Y junto con todo lo que se ha expuesto por la doctora Ailín, también hay que decir que hay un proyecto, que es el proyecto de Cacho Romerillo, en el que hay un punto de acceso gratis para una población realmente en Cuba, bueno, menos favorecida. Hay que explicarse todo el proyecto, pero realmente es una población que se ha trabajado intensamente en un proyecto orgánico de movilizar a toda esa población alrededor de un entorno de cultura, como es el caso del Museo Orgánico Romerillo. Es un artista de la plástica, y ahí está insertado la Sociedad Cubana de Derecho e Informática, haciendo uso de los recursos tecnológicos que están ahí para formar a esa población en un uso consciente de las tecnologías, sobre todo de un respeto ético. Y trabajando también con la extensión de este proyecto hacia otras zonas muy importantes, del país, como es el caso de la provincia de Guantánamo. Hay otro proyecto también que está desarrollando la Facultad de Comunicaciones con los gobiernos locales, específicamente el gobierno de Centro Habana, y ahí también estamos trabajando. Y creo que esto hace sinergia con el proyecto también laboratoria. Ahora, a mí nada más me cabe una duda por un problema que nosotros tenemos resuelto. Es decir, todas las mujeres en Cuba ganan igual que los hombres. Por lo tanto, todas las desarrolladoras tendrían igual percepción económica respecto a los desarrolladores hombres. Me preocupa que estemos formando tantas mujeres desarrolladoras y no nos planteemos que deben ganar igual que los hombres. Muchas gracias.
Great question. And then we'll come back to the panel to see if there are any answers. So, please.
Thank you. I'm David Song from Beijing Internet Institute, and I'm a technical guy, and it's my first time to participate in IGF here. And I would like to, I'm not have questions, but I would like to offer a phenomena observed during when I heard some news. Many people would know that people use mobile app to do a lot of things. There one news I heard make me some thinking that some old people that cannot use the mobile phone, a computer, that cannot access to some services that some traditional services are moving to the internet. The news I heard is about an old lady that's in the street cannot find a taxi. So that because like Uber and Didi in China now are very popular, and especially young guys and some people are very fond of using it. So a lot of even the traditional taxi use this app to run their business. Some older people can not even compete with the the young guys. So I just proposed this topic and to ask if there are any discussion here or related to this because today's topic is about inclusive development or inclusive growth of the internet. So I would like to ask people, to challenge people here to think a way to help more people to better access the services in the internet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So so inclusion is actually all people, right? And using the internet to solve real world problems, exactly like you said. So there may be some responses to some of the questions. Everybody does not have to respond. And then we're going to come to Alejandro, who is our rapporteur, who's going to try to just quickly pull together some of the little nuggets of things, insights from this part of the discussion, which has really been good. It's been great. So does anybody want to? Yes, Edmund, please.
Yeah, in response to the gentleman just mentioned, but I wanted to respond to the gentleman earlier in terms of youth participation on this particular panel. I agree very much that is very important, and I wanted to bring you to attention to one of the workshops that is a feeder into this session, which is the workshop which will happen in workshop room 4 at noon, which talks about youth participation both on capacity building and policy participation and on these panels, right? So we can't just bring them in and let them, sit around. We need to get them to actually actively speak at panels as well. So I agree very much. And in response to the gentleman here, I think that's a great topic. I mean, I've been trying to advocate that concept. We talk about the digital divide and the wide digital divide and narrowing it a lot. People that cannot access the internet, the rural places. But we forget about the deepening digital divide in urban areas. Even though 90% of people probably in Beijing is connected to the internet, the 10% is left behind so far. So even though it's a narrow digital divide, it's deepening. And that is what causes market failure. And I think what the gentleman just mentioned is market failure. The market has failed because it doesn't, allow the elderly, those who are not online, now are missing out on services. And that's one, when markets fail, that requires intervention, and that's where internet governance and policy comes into play. So we can't just look at how wide or narrow the digital divide is, but also how deep the digital divide is, even though when it's narrow. So I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point as well. Because one of the things that we know from some of the research is that as more people in a country connect to the internet, it closes the income inequality gap between countries. But the paradox is that as more people in a country connect, it widens the income inequality in that country, because the people who are connected improve so much faster than the people not connected. So in the name of equality, we're not going to tell people to disconnect, so there's only one answer. Everybody has to be connected, right? So it's a great point, Edmund. It's a really great point that you made. Any other final comments? Yolanda, and then Daniel.
Sí, rápidamente para nuestros colegas del sector educativo, me da muchísimo gusto haber escuchado al profesor de Cuba, al profesor de la Universidad de México, y yo creo que todos compartimos en este ecosistema de múltiples partes la importancia de tener un proceso inclusivo y un proceso integral que se da justamente en el ambiente enseñanza-aprendizaje. Creo que un gran reto que tenemos todos los países es generar programas integrales donde al profesor se le empodere, donde tengamos mecanismos de desarrollar habilidades digitales en el profesorado, que a su vez aprovechen al máximo el tener el acceso a Internet y a dispositivos de cómputo en el proceso de enseñanza-aprendizaje para generar condiciones y sociedades más inclusivas a través de un uso responsable, ¿no? El Internet y las tecnologías de información son un gran habilitador, pero como todo en la vida, así como aprendimos a cruzar la calle volteando a la derecha y a la izquierda para ver que no vengan coches, también hay que enseñar a nuestra sociedad en todos los sectores, principalmente en los jóvenes, a un uso responsable y sobre todo que ese uso signifique mejores condiciones de vida y de productividad.
Gracias.
Sí, para agregar a lo que decía Yolanda, Internet no es el fin, es el camino por el cual tratamos de construir. Hay un gran foco dentro de lo que tienen que ser los gobiernos en ayudar a los docentes y a los maestros a llegar al mismo nivel que tienen los alumnos. Hay una cuestión generacional y una cuestión de nativos digitales donde nuestros profesores, docentes, maestros corren de atrás al alumnado. Hay planes exitosos como el plan Ceibal en Uruguay, que es una One Laptop per Child que genera campus en las escuelas primarias y secundarias. En la Argentina es lo mismo con Conectar Igualdad y diferentes partes de la región. La computadora deja de ser la computadora en sí no es algo físico donde se genera, sino lo que uno tiene que generar es una plataforma de conocimiento para integrar a los docentes y a los alumnos, como decía Yolanda, en un acto responsable, ¿no?
Thank you very much. Now, we have two phenomenal rapporteurs. They have the hardest job here, which is to try to just distill things. So the rapporteur for this first part of the discussion, Alejandro, and please.
Thank you, Pepper. My name is Alejandro Pisanti. Thank you for the invitation. I thank the organizers for thinking I could do this job. It was made easier by your call, Pepper, on distilling the most concrete examples. Because we have a transcript. So I would mention maybe the salient points of things that people can actually take for further work. One of them is the emphasis on government services, including changing them, not only automating them, so that, for example, they make people's lives easier, like for creating companies, starting them up, getting them registered. Second, it's the important message I distill from the session is empowering the communities, not only bringing in the capacity building, but actually doing it in such a way that the community becomes more empowered. And it's a focus on the community as well as on the individual, if I read or understood well. The example from Laboratoria, they're working closely with young women who have a particular combination of skills and opportunity and denied access paths so that you are breaking the barrier with their strengths. I bow to my colleague Chang Liu
through her to Madame Hu, to our professor. I refuse to only call her Madame Hu because she's a very high-ranking academic. It's hard to distill from that a way to empower what will China have? Half of the population are women. So from her example, to scale it to 600 million women in China will be hard, but it's really a shining example to be taken into account. I would also say that actual empowerment, bringing the young people, and I will say the young, the old, the people with disabilities, all the communities that are not part of the mainstream into the decision-making processes is important. I do have a personal editorial note there about the scaling of that kind of effort, so that maybe you're not going to create an assembly in a stadium, but you will have to create some webs of trust or other mechanisms so that people's voices are not lost in the process. And the government action for inclusion is extremely important. And I would say for all the projects that we saw, even when they are undertaken by all stakeholders, shaped by stakeholders, the government's responsibility is very high because very few things scale the way governments scale. And I'm say this is an editorial extraction from the example given by Egypt. The kind of effort that was shown there and that we know in other places that can be made by governments can only have that size and that scale when it includes public monies and public efforts. But the multi-stakeholder process within it or around it has to be preserved as well. It is very easy to extract a wrong, let's say, a biased conclusion from a project like that, since only the government has the scale to do it, the monies and the equipment, the structures. It doesn't mean that it has to be governed by the government alone. Listening to the community, to building together with the communities, especially with the marginalized communities, is equally important. And the final point I extract is the emphasis on, when going back to education, on the digital skills for teachers. And I will add an editorial note of myself, which is don't buy the digital natives rhetoric at face value. Digital natives are in all generations, and you may have very limited skills within digital native populations that have to be fostered. Things as basic as search capacity, the use of Boolean logic within search strings, very elementary stuff, escapes both aged researchers in universities and very young assumed digital natives. So use cases, going back to the community, I will take that from Raul, is very important so that you know what you actually have to fix before bringing in a program. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That was a great way to bring closure to this part of the discussion. What we're going to do now is move into the second discussion topic, which is capacity building. And that naturally is going to lead into the third discussion topic after that, which is about local relevant content, local language, and what makes content relevant. And that's linked very closely to capacity building. So some of the people up here are going to stay up here, and some are going to move, and other people are going to be coming up. So why don't we do that? And I'm going to hand off the moderating for the next session to Dr. Yosef. We're just going to keep going, and we hope more people will come in, and given the different topics as well. So I just want to thank the panelists and the audience. You are panelists as well, because you know as much about these things as we do, and we're trying to get the discussion going. So yeah, just come on up, and I'm going to hand the microphone to Dr. Yosef. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Papa.
je pense qu'on peut commencer. Parce qu'il est, il est déjà 11h22, donc on a causé peut-être quelques retards. On est dans un forum international pour une bonne diversité. Je vais parler en français. En fait, c'est la cause déguisée, mais en fait, parce que je suis en français beaucoup mieux qu'en anglais. En fait, la sous-session qui vient d'être terminée a montré, si on prend en compte la réaction de la salle et les questions qui ont été posées hier, lorsqu'on était en réunion de préparation, Monsieur Piper, Madame Elisabeth et tous les participants, ils avaient en tête, est-ce que la session va être aussi interactive? Est-ce que l'audience va être attentive et intéressée? Est-ce qu'il va y avoir des questions concernant les problématiques posées? En fait, la réaction de la salle a montré quel intérêt a suscité la première sous-session. Donc maintenant, si on pose la question à la suite de ça, est-ce que l'Internet est un vecteur d'inclusion, de croissance inclusive, pardon? Je pense que la réponse et la réaction de la salle a bien montré ça. Mais bon, si l'Internet est un vecteur de croissance inclusive, il faut bien avoir en tête que cette croissance inclusive ou ce vecteur-là, pour qu'il fonctionne bien dans les pays où il y a une vraie fracture numérique, on est face à des défis. En fait, la première sous-session a montré ou a discuté les défis qui sont liés à l'inclusion des personnes vulnérables, précaires, qui sont parfois les femmes en difficulté ou la jeunesse en chômage ou qui sont pas très bien formées. Une deuxième catégorie d'obstacles, c'est en fait de nature technique. C'est l'infrastructure, l'accessibilité à l'accès et aussi le renforcement des capacités d'utiliser cette infrastructure. C'est le sujet de notre deuxième sous-session et je commence. Je ne sais pas si Madame la Présidente voulait avoir une petite introduction ou je commence directement à donner la parole à Monsieur Ryan Mathieu. Donc, il y a une différence. OK. Donc, on commence par un intervenant qui est à distance, Monsieur Antonio Gracia Zabalos. Oui, donc. Monsieur Antonio Gracia. Un petit problème technique, en fait, lié à l'Internet, c'est normal, mais bon. Non. Écoutez, moi je propose, le temps que ce problème technique soit résolu, on passe à notre premier intervenant selon le papier, Monsieur Ryan Mathieu. Allez-y.
Thank you. My name is Rajan Matthews, and I represent the mobile operators of India. In terms of capacity building, I'd just like to, first of all, acknowledge the very great contribution that the government of India has done to ITC by laying out a very aggressive vision of making sure that all 1.3 billion people, and if you take the addressable market, at least 1.1 billion of the citizens of this great country are connected to broadband. And so that vision is now rolled out because of government initiatives as well as private initiatives. So that means we are talking about the private sector investing almost $10 billion every year for the next 3 to 5 years to ensure that capacity building vis-a-vis coverage is provided in just about every part of the country. So that is the first main issue in capacity building, is the massive investments required by private operators, because the whole telecom industry has been privatized in India, and that will be a major challenge in terms of capacity building. The second major issue that we face in India is, of course, citizens' education. We have 26, at last count, official languages, and because the internet is primarily English-based, we have a big problem in terms of educating the consumers so that they can access the content on the internet once they have connectivity to use that effectively and efficiently. The third area is, of course, partnerships. And the one thing that we're discovering in India in terms of being able to utilize the internet is ensuring that this is a conjoint effort. The most recent example of that was the demonetization of currency in India, where rupees 500 and 1,000 was not legal tender anymore. And what we saw was the great fracture in the population of the haves and the have-nots, because the only people who could continue to get currency were those people who had access to a digital medium, a payments medium, or an internet medium, so that they can access the money in the bank. So again, this issue of partnerships, both with the government, the private, society in general, is very, very critical for ongoing success. The fourth area that we'd like to talk about is enlightened policy and regulation. And I think these are absolutely critical in terms of policy, far-reaching, because the internet is fast developing and we need to keep up, and regulation, which is light touch, so that we don't have problems trying to second-guess. So the four areas that we're talking about, the massive investments that are required, citizen education, partnerships, and of course, an enlightened regulatory and policy environment. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Mathieu. C'était très intéressant. Donc, apparemment, on vient de me dire qu'on peut redonner la parole à Monsieur Zabalos, mais on va avoir quelques 30 secondes de délai dû aux équipements techniques. Allez-y.
Hola, buenos días a todos. No sé si me pueden escuchar ahora. Muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad. Simplemente hacer una pequeña reflexión sobre un par de puntos que creo que no se han mencionado a lo largo de la sesión y que creo que puede ser especialmente importante. Por una parte, estamos hablando de un sector muy intensivo en términos de capital, con una necesidad muy importante de involucrar a distintos actores a nivel de gobierno. Hasta ahora hemos estado hablando mucho de las implicaciones, pues, de la academia, de la parte de gobierno relativa a la parte de telecomunicaciones o autoridades de regulación, pero sin embargo creo que un aspecto muy importante a considerar va a ser fundamentalmente la introducción de los ministerios de finanzas y en particular del ministro de Hacienda en todas estas decisiones que tienen que ver alrededor de lograr la inclusión financiera. Y junto con este tema, un aspecto fundamental precisamente será las condiciones de inversión y las condiciones de financiación. Y en este sentido, el rol de las multilaterales va a ser un elemento esencial. Estamos hablando de capacitación, estamos hablando de aspectos asociados a educación, a salud, a servicios públicos y digitalización del conjunto de la sociedad. Y al final el rol de las multilaterales va a ser un aspecto también muy importante y que creo que puede ser interesante poner encima de la mesa como parte de la discusión. Es decir, ¿cómo vamos a estar financiando todo esto? ¿Cuál tendría que ser la implicación de distintos actores a nivel de gobierno para garantizar precisamente esa coordinación interinstitucional entre los distintos actores claves? Academia fundamental, la parte del propio gobierno y muy importante también la participación privada. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Zapalos, pour cette intervention qui a éclairé certaines questions. Je pense pendant la discussion avec la salle, on va peut-être détailler plus. Je vais maintenant passer, pour gagner le retard qu'on a eu, la parole à Monsieur Edmond Chang.
Thank you. Edmund Chung here, again from .Asia. And in terms of capacity building and building on my earlier intervention on youth inclusion, I think really the empowerment is the critical element leading to capacity building as well. At .Asia, in fact, we have been involved in the very beginning in bringing youth to like the internet governance, including to IGF, ICANN, IETF, and other forums. And Raul, my colleague, mentioned earlier the Youth at IGF program, and I'm pretty proud to say that .Asia has been part of that in the inception of being coming from one of the programs started back in 2008, the NetMission.Asia program, which led into the Youth IGF program at the Asia Pacific version of the IGF, the Asia Pacific Regional IGF. And many others, other initiatives, and the whole ecosystem of youth empowerment work in internet governance, which has now led to other areas in Europe, in Latin America, and Africa, and here, of course, at the global IGF. But what I wanted to talk about is really what we learned in terms of capacity building. Really, two things that we've learned is important, and I think it applies to youth and women and elderly as well. And that's one is that really, when we think about it, instead of walk before you run, you need to let them to run before they walk. That's the new sense of the internet. And the second thing that we learn is peer-based learning. Role of the teachers, I think others have mentioned, the role of the teachers have changed with the internet because the students can access the information easily. What the role of the internet, what the role of the teachers are then important is to facilitate the peer-based learning. And these are elements I think are important in terms of capacity building, making it relevant, making it interesting, and that applies to elderly situation as well. Some of the programs we've participated in is having the elderly teach the elderly, how to use the internet, which is much more effective than having kids teach the elderly, which seems like a good idea, but you try to teach your grandmother how to use the internet, and you know how frustrating that is. So what is important is really, I think, the two aspects, again, getting them to walk before they run, not to walk before they run, but to run before they walk. Get them on the panels, let them participate, let them feel, participated and empowered and inclusive, then provide the information. Then they're more interested to learn. Because I think at the end of the day, capacity building is as much about building hope as it is building skills. And building hope means really making it fun and relevant for those we are looking to build capacity for. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Chung. Merci beaucoup pour cette intervention. Mais je pense que vous avez aussi en tête que la population cible de l'insertion numérique ou de la renforcement des capacités, ce ne sont pas essentiellement les étudiants dans les universités ou les étudiants dans les écoles. Ce sont des populations, des jeunes, peut-être qui n'ont pas été à l'école et qui sont au chômage. Et aussi, on a toujours en tête qu'il s'agit d'un renforcement des capacités dans le cadre du concept de la croissance inclusive, qui a comme cible peut-être les pays où vraiment il y a une vraie fracture, où il y a une vraie pauvreté, et les pays qui n'ont pas encore, qui sont pas encore bien développés dans le monde de l'Internet et tout ce qui est accessibilité, accès à l'Internet. Donc je pense qu'il faut aussi, pendant les questions, éclairer quels sont les programmes, quelles sont les méthodes, quels sont les moyens qui sont possibles pour insérer et former et renforcer les capacités numériques de cette population. Je passe la parole à M. Guy Berger de l'UNESCO.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Greetings, everybody. In sustainable development, you have a certain goal which reads as follows: peace, justice, and strong institutions. Who can tell me what goal that is? What number? Peace, justice, strong institutions. 16, thank you very much. Many people think it should be number 1, because without that, what else can you do? If you look at 1610, the target under goal 1610, it is public access to information and fundamental freedoms. Well, if there was ever a case for why 16 should be number one, it's this point, public access to information and fundamental freedoms. Because without that, you're not going to have peace, justice, strong institutions. In fact, you're not going to have much else. Information, public access to information is something that the internet is about and something that the IGF is about. Just as we do not take or should not take the internet for granted, we should not take public access to information and fundamental freedoms for granted. So what capacity needs to be built to actually get public access to information and fundamental freedoms online? What skills do we need to navigate this ocean of the internet? What skills do we need to fish in this ocean and to build the boats to float on this ocean? One answer that UNESCO has come up with is media and information literacy. This is a chapeau concept. It covers a lot of skills which relate to online and offline. But what's important about this is that it includes digital literacies, which themselves need some unpacking as to what we mean by that, and I'll touch on that in half a second. But I want to tell you, there's a wonderful, large movement called the Global Alliance for Partnerships in Media and Information Literacy, a global movement that is trying to define what are these competencies that are needed and how to actually get them developed. From the UNESCO point of view, we would identify 3 bundles. These are bundles of competencies that are relevant to children in schools, but also to adults and also to elderly people, as we've said. So the 3 bundles of skills. First, you need to understand the internet. You need to understand the affordances of the internet. You need to understand who the actors are on the internet, what their interests are, what their agendas and their hidden agendas are, what their offerings are. You need to understand what it means to get a so-called free service. You need to understand the problems on the internet, and you need to understand the opportunities on the internet. That's bundle 1. You need to understand the internet. Bundle 2, you need to know your rights, and you need to know how to advocate for your rights on the internet. You need to know your right to seek and receive and impart information. That is the essence of the right to freedom of expression. Number 3, and by the way, you need the right to privacy also. You need to assert that as well, and you need to understand. Package number 3 of competencies. How to use the internet. On the input side, you as the input, you need to know how to find information, how to sift information, how to assess it, how to evaluate it, how to distinguish truth from lies. You need to understand also how to convert information into knowledge. In other words, you need to learn how to learn when you're online. This is a key competence that we haven't really interrogated. We have MOOCs. We need a lot more work to understand how MOOCs are working. I can mention later some MOOCs that we're doing with judges here in Mexico and Latin America on freedom of expression. That's on the input side, how to learn. How to learn on the output side. How to learn to create content. How to learn to do business on the internet. How to learn on the internet how information businesses can help realize SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth. It's important to understand also, when you're creating on the internet, SDG 9C about innovation, which also is about internet connectivity and internet innovation. So to summarize, we need capacities for 3 things. To understand the internet, because that tells us where we are. We need to know our rights on the internet. That tells us who we are. We are global citizens. Number 3, we need to know how to use the internet. That tells us what we can do with the internet. So to conclude, sustainable development has to include the development of people's ability to use the internet, especially for 1610, public access to information, fundamental freedoms. And if we can capacitate each user to use the net for public access to information and fundamental freedom, then, in turn, the net will build our capacity to achieve the diverse dimensions of development indicated by the SDGs: poverty, gender, sustainable cities, you name them all. In sum, the proposition I'm putting to you is this. It is logical Start with media and information literacy competencies if you want to make mileage in achieving the SDGs. Thank you.
Monsieur Berger, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup pour cette intervention excellente et pertinente. Et en fait, vous nous avez éclairé sur le large spectre du renforcement des capacités. En fait, il ne s'agit pas des capacités techniques seulement, mais même des capacités réglementaires et juridiques. Merci beaucoup, c'était excellent. J'ai appris beaucoup de choses. Maintenant, je pense qu'on a à découvrir une expérience assez intéressante, et c'est le docteur Wael Abdelal qui va prendre la parole et qui va... c'est ça, non?
Yes.
Allez-y.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's my first attendance to this type of conference. I am a physician, practicing physician. I'm chairman and medical director of a charity hospital back in Egypt. And at the same time, I am the chairman of the Telehealth Foundation. Thank you all for inviting me. And I'd just like to say a few points that don't be late to the future, because the future has already left. And it's a very alarming note, because the speed, not only the experiences of the future, but the changes, the speed of the changes, as you have said, running before you walk, is extremely important. Lots of workforce, communities, and even governments will become obsolete if we're not careful, and we are not in control anymore. Things are moving around us, and we have to be very intelligent. We know that industries of the future in healthcare and others, particularly after looking at parallel computing, algorithms and meta-information, the abundance of communication devices, and the cloud, facilitated the innovations of artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, and cybersecurity. And we understand in healthcare that this will probably be one of the strongest devices in healthcare, and we are utilizing this now in our work in Egypt and our programs that are happening there. Our main primarily goal in capacity building is that things that used to work no more work, and we need to fast adapt and adopt the new changes, and this is what we need to build in the capacity, building the capacity of the minds of our youth. And those who don't shift and adapt quickly will probably become obsolete if they resist this change. We have to have an open mind, flexible approach, adapt and adopt quickly. We need to look at the selective skills of each of our individuals. You don't have to be one thing goes through all. We need to be very selective and build to empower these youth in using their skills and improve it using the ICT as a power for that. I'll be speaking about more details of our programs maybe in the next session, and tomorrow we have a morning session at 10:45 about telehealth and telemedicine and the programs we have already on the ground. I don't want to take more than my time, but we have a very nice example from the morning from Gabriella Rocca about how the Darwinian natural selection with web developers, they don't have to go to college and school, but they succeeded by natural selection, being intelligent about their choice of route. And at the end, we need to start by so many pilots and build on the successes. We will have failures, edit them, build on successes, and make these successes infect other programs. Keep an open mind. We will always be changing and be wary of that. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Abdelal. Maintenant, je passe la parole à M. Raoul Efberia de l'ISOC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I already spoke a little about capacity building in the previous slot, but the Internet Society strategy on development is based on 4 pillars: building infrastructure, building capacities, bringing our expertise from the work on the ground to feed the policy debate at the international fora and the local and regional level. And the fourth pillar is capacity building. So what is capacity building for deploying infrastructure, for maintaining infrastructure, for using the infrastructure, capacity building for building communities, for empowering communities, for working with the communities in different aspects, and capacity building for bringing this experience from all stakeholders and the expertise that we have distributed among all stakeholders to the policy debate. And this is exactly what we are talking about, so building capacities across all the needs. And without those capacities, we cannot deploy the ICTs. And without the ICTs, we cannot really achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Echeverria. Maintenant, je donne la parole à notre dernier intervenant, peut-être oui, Monsieur Eric Loeb, d'ATT.
Merci. Well, as I was preparing at first, I was thinking to talk a bit about some of the demand-side capacity building examples, but then as I've listened to many of the other interventions, I'm thinking that there are a few very fundamental supply-side issues that are worth mentioning, and it's at the risk of either stating the overly obvious or making sure we reinforce some things that aren't always thought of as the bright, shiny objects of something new. But I think they're worth mentioning because they are of a very macro effect, and in my experience working in countries all over the world, the extent to which these very fundamental issues are being addressed on encouraging the supply side, some of the things to which Rajan had mentioned, bear mentioning. So first, Universal Service Fund reform. Just a very fundamental point to take a look at what Universal Service Fund is in place, to the extent the funds are being used at all, which is a problem in some instances. Are they being used to promote the supply side capacity for the services of the future, mobile, broadband, et cetera, not another fixed line PSTN phone? It's a very fundamental issue, but one that can have a magnifying impact. Second, tax policy. To the extent that the services that we're talking about for developing inclusion and human capacity are considered a luxury and taxed at a high level and taxed because it's a very large, easy source to identify, you are missing out on the multiplier effect of digital inclusion, societal inclusion, economic inclusion. And this is an area where I think government policy is ripe for innovation, of thinking about ways that rather than going for that early big hit, you think about an aggregation of marginal gains as you've encouraged a much more inclusive society and economy. And third policy, also fundamental, national broadband plans. They've been shown to be incredibly effective at addressing supply and demand side issues. If it hasn't been done, do it. If it has been done and it was done 5 years ago, it's probably out of date because the technology is so far evolved in that period of time that whatever the conclusions were then may not be in keeping with what is appropriate or possible now. So again, very macro points on the supply side. There are other examples we can come back to on the demand side, but I thought those are important to mention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Loeb. En fait, vous avez éclairé à votre tour certains nouveaux aspects de cette croissance inclusive et ces problèmes d'Internet et des taxes sur les différentes transactions. Moi, maintenant, on arrive à la fin. Au nom de l'audience, je remercie nos éminents intervenants, M. Mathieu, M. Zaballos, M. Chung, M. Berger, Dr Abdelal, M. Echeverria et M. Loeb. Je pense que toutes ces interventions ont suscité sûrement des questions dans la salle. Mon collègue, M. Pepper, il est aussi dans la salle. On va collecter les questions et je pense que... Ah bon, d'accord, allez-y.
Thank you very much. I would like to announce the participation from the remote hub from Havana, Cuba.
It's a very keen group that we have in Cuba that would like to engage on this topic with all of you. Thank you.
D'accord, merci.
Un saludo para todos desde acá, desde Cuba. Quisiéramos compartir con ustedes la experiencia de una institución social que ha sido efectiva durante 29 años en brindar acceso a las tecnologías y la inclusión de los sectores, principalmente en el uso de las tecnologías de la información y las comunicaciones. Por ejemplo, somos una institución que tiene 600 centros tecnológicos que están distribuidos por todo el país, que surgió con el objetivo, como ya les dije, de socializar las tecnologías. Brindamos dentro de nuestros principales servicios cursos en diferentes tipos de modalidades, cursos de formación básica, a distancia, posgrado, donde incluimos tanto niños, jóvenes, adultos, personas de la tercera edad, así como personas con discapacidad. Por ejemplo, este año solamente hemos graduado 72.900 mujeres de nuestros cursos y 138.000 personas con discapacidad. Esto hace que estas personas puedan acceder a nuestros centros y además tener acceso a otro de nuestros servicios, que es la generación de contenidos y la generación de acceso a portales como, por ejemplo, la enciclopedia colaborativa ECURRED, que es uno de los sitios más visitados de nuestro país, que tiene hoy más de 160.000 artículos publicados y recibe 250.000 visitas únicas diarias. También tenemos la plataforma de blog Reflejos disponible para todo el mundo, donde se pueden compartir experiencias propias de los que postean sus comentarios, sus experiencias propias. Además tenemos la red social La Tendedera, que está disponible en la red de Joven Club y que se pretende incluir con otras redes del país, y que mediante la cual las personas tienen acceso todos sin discriminación de raza, sexo, sin discriminación de ningún tipo. Esta es la experiencia de Joven Club. Quisiéramos agradecer la oportunidad de este contacto desde acá, desde Cuba. Un saludo para todos ustedes.
Merci beaucoup à nos amis à Cuba. Merci beaucoup pour leur volonté de participer à ce forum, mais aussi pour ce cas d'école qui représente un success story dans le cas de capacity building. Donc maintenant, les questions sont ouvertes à la salle. Mon collègue, M. Pepper, il est aussi là dans la salle peut-être pour faciliter les questions. Allez-y. Donc là-bas, oui.
Hello everybody, I'm Ahmad Ramlawi from Lebanon. First, let me thank you for sharing inspiring and bright ideas and experiences with us. But since day zero of this forum, everybody is talking about connecting the next billion. But in order to bring opportunities to LDCs, my question is, have anyone developed a measurement scale with respect to sustainability and inclusiveness that gives us figures about how much is achieved in order to know how much work still has to be done? Because Mr. Rajan Matthews from India has told us massive figures about how much money they have to spend to bring coverage to people, and how much empowerment skills has to be done and has to be achieved in order to upscale the skills of the people. Thank you.
Merci, M. Ramlaoui. Je pense, avant de donner la question, la parole à la salle, je pense que M. Mathieu et peut-être M. Zapalos, s'il est encore en ligne, vous pouvez éclairer ce point-là. Vous voulez répondre, M. Mathieu?
Yeah, thank you. I think very briefly, there are metrics that we track. For example, right now, every month, we see how many new people are coming on from 2G to 3G to 4G, how many new cell towers are being built, how many of these are 2G, 3G, 4G, what areas. We coordinate with the government to see areas and pockets where there is no coverage, and so we are working with the government to roll out in those areas coverage. We are also rolling out, along with the regulator and the policy maker, educational forums that are conducted once every so often. We track the number of people that are receiving connectivity every month. For example, now we know that we have 250 million people who are connected to the internet, who have connectivity. We have to reach 650 million. That's the target by 2020. So there are metrics in place in the government and in private industry that track progress.
Merci beaucoup. Cher Piper, je pense que l'action est la vôtre. The action is yours. Ok, allez-y.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mariana, estudio en la Universidad de Guadalajara Relaciones Internacionales y mi pregunta para ustedes es si se han enfrentado que en alguna comunidad no permitan la entrada o no deseen estar conectados y cómo han tomado medidas o cuál es la solución que han encontrado para ese tipo de comunidades o ese tipo de gente que está cerrada hacia el cambio.
If I can answer that question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, it is very surprising that in India we have had a problem with what is considered electromagnetic field exposure. So in India, we have had problems in the rural areas and in some urban areas, semi-urban areas, where people, when we want to put up connectivity, say we do not want connectivity because we are concerned with the health impacts of the emissions from the mobile towers. We have had to conduct a massive educational program. The government has had to come in. We have had to include doctors and health professionals. But this is an example when people have said, no, we don't want connectivity because of health hazards.
Je pense que Edmond aussi a répondre aussi. Allez-y, Monsieur Chung.
Thank you. I think that's a great question, and in part of our work, I mentioned a little bit the elderly. They are a group that is sometimes says, I don't want to touch this technology, just go away. And the way we approach it is, first of all, it's a matter not of, usually the pushback is about, they worry about the dependency then upon the technology. They've heard about a lot of bad things about it. So two things we usually bring along. One is why they want to use it. And the first thing is important is to make it useful for their daily lives. They are becoming more distant with their grandchildren. And if they want to connect with their grandchildren, which every one of them wants to, they need to use the technology. Once they use the first time, they're hooked. And that's very important to create an environment that it solves some of the problems immediately. And that's part of what I mean by run before they walk. Get them to actually use the technology first, and also to explain thereupon to improve the skills. But I think the main aspect is really to expose them, but not make them feel that they need to be then dependent on it. Make sure that they can actually master the technology, and they can always put down their phone. That's an important aspect, I think, in terms of pushing back on the ones who push back on capacity building.
Oui, d'accord. Cher Robert, je vois qu'on a deux questions. Dr. Abdelal aussi, il a ajouté un élément de réponse.
Okay, I want to put a reverse comment on that. Actually, in our experience with telemedicine in Egypt, which is also supported by the government of health and communication, we found that to the opposite. In areas where there was no internet connectivity, when they heard about the merits of telemedicine in nearby villages, it actually enticed people to work to develop and put internet connectivity or even improve the bandwidth in that region. So if you prove success, I think people, it's not easy, it's difficult, but it can work the other way around as well.
Thank you, Dr. Abdelal. We have two questions. One question here. Please present yourself.
My name is Wisdom Donko from Ghana. I have a small contribution here. Okay, thousands of specialized collaborations between public actors and government businesses will be required in order to fully implement the SDGs by 2030. Okay. Although infrastructure projects often generate the greatest attention in this regard, they represent only one of many essential forms of public-private cooperation across the SDGs landscape. Now, different sectors are providing many pilots and experiments from which crucial lessons can be drawn. Some are good, some are bad. So for this reason, and in my thinking, for us to fully reach the SDGs, we need to create that enabling environment. And one, I see the following as the environment that we need to create for us to fully reach the SDGs. One is the infrastructure. Because we need that. Without infrastructure, I don't think reaching the SDG will be possible. We need that infrastructure to be able to create that enabling environment. Should be shared infrastructure. And then we also have to think about content. Content is very important. And then we have to start actually talking to our governments to start opening up data. So we need data to actually inform what is going on and all that. And then this in itself will bring about transparency. And if there is transparency, there will be trust between the citizens and then government. And then it will also bring about accountability. And then it will bring about innovation and then job. With data, our students can actually use it to kind of come up with their own job, entrepreneurs. That in itself will actually create employment for the masses and all that. And then we also have to consider the judiciary and then law enforcement. Well, we need to bring them to speed because most of the issues that is going on within our countries, concerns the judiciary and then law enforcement. If they don't know anything about internet governance, the business that is going on, it will not help. And then we also have to start showing impact. And if possible, we have to start bringing our grandmothers from the rural areas to come to IGF, to actually come and share some of their experiences, what they are going through and all that. And I believe this in itself will help us reach the SDGs.
Thank you very much. I think we have three parties to the answer. Maybe Mr. Ryan and Mr. Berger and Mr. Ribeira. And Madame la Présidente, we start by Mr. Ryan. Have you some element of comments or answer? No. Concerning the infrastructure, the cost of infrastructure.
Again, just to reiterate, I think the point we made was the massive amounts of infrastructure. Let me just give you some parameters. Today in India, we have 500 million cell towers, 350 MSC switching centers, each of which are several $1 million. So, as I said, the magnitude of the investment is about $10 billion US every year for the next several years. We've just begun to roll out 3G and 4G, and we have to cover the whole country in order to be able to afford the interconnectivity. So the massive amounts of investment, and that can only be done in partnership with the government. If the government does not provide the enabling policies and the regulatory, just recently we just talked about right away. It is extremely difficult to acquire land or sites for putting up our cell towers for issues of health and other. So support of the government is absolutely essential.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Raoul, allow me to give the floor to Mr. Berger, and after Mr. Berger, go ahead.
Well, thank you for that point from Ghana. Certainly the enabling environment does require those points of infrastructure, content, transparency, as you said. I think what's relevant for this panel is it needs capacity also. It needs the competence of the grandmothers. They should know what are the opportunities to use the internet, what are the problems. They should know how to use it for personal work, personal relations, family relations, grandchildren, but also how they can use the internet for sustainable development more broadly. So that means using it not just for personal reasons, but also for societal reasons. And this doesn't come naturally. You know, people have to experience some empowerment, self-learning, participation in online learning, participation in offline learning, to realize that this is the most incredibly powerful technology. But you can have the technology, if you don't have the competence to use it, you will use, what, 5% of its potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Raoul, please.
Thank you very much. That was a great speech. In fact, you should have been here on the stage. Thank you very much for that. And I will just mention a couple of things you said. Of course, I agree 100% with the idea of the enabling environment. We have to promote enabling environments, and therefore promoting investment, for promoting innovation. I think that consolidating an innovation ecosystem is crucial. That's is very important, and also for promoting entrepreneurship. And but the other point you mentioned about private-public partnerships on sustainable development goals, that's very important. And I think that's while for many of us the internet has never been as Abadi in the previous slot said. It has never been the ultimate objective of most of us. Internet has been always a vehicle for achieving other things. So the Sustainable Development Goals didn't change anything in that sense, but they offer a platform for a common understanding, because now it is very clear that we have to work together, not only for incrementing connectivity, for increasing connectivity, but for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals on education, on healthcare, on creating jobs, etc. And so it's offer a platform for that all stakeholders can talk to each other much more clearly now, thanks to the existence of Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that it provides opportunity for much more private-public partnership, and I hope that it happens. And thank you very much again.
Thank you, Mr. Raoul. The floor is Madame la Présidente Martinez.
Gracias. Retomando el tema de cómo mejoramos y promovemos la apropiación, creo que son las comunidades las que tienen que ser dueñas del proceso. En México hemos aprendido eso y tenemos excelentes ejemplos. El gobierno acaba de tener una licitación muy grande para la red compartida. Queremos que toda la infraestructura esté disponible para un proveedor mayorista y luego que vengan proveedores locales. Y para poder tener servicios locales de comunicaciones es la comunidad la que tiene que administrar la red, la que tiene que administrar el servicio, y son alianzas muy importantes con sociedad civil las que nos permiten tener programas de apropiación y de desarrollo de capacidades, como nos compartía nuestro colega de UNESCO, para que la gente entienda el Internet. Entender el Internet es saber cómo funciona una red y cómo administrarla por la comunidad, ¿no? Aprender a saber manejar sus derechos también debe de ser la propia comunidad, y aprender a usar y a darle un significado a ese uso varía de comunidad en comunidad. Entonces, ese ejemplo de múltiples partes interesadas y de desarrollo comunitario es el más importante para que entonces sí, el Internet tenga impacto en el contexto de cada una de las comunidades que administra y es responsable de su red y del uso eficiente de las telecomunicaciones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have two other questions in the room. One there, please.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Mauricio Quiroz, estudio en la Universidad del ITESO. Estoy totalmente de acuerdo con lo que dijo Guy Berg. Es muy importante dar capacitación a las personas para el buen uso del Internet, el cómo se va a utilizar para la educación, trabajos, gobierno, etcétera, ¿no? Pero mi pregunta es, ¿cuáles son los programas que se están implementando, o se están haciendo, o se van a llevar a cabo para dar ese tipo de educación? Y otra pregunta es si el alcance que se está dando es lo mismo que el abastecimiento que se está dando. Si se puede llevar a la par la demanda que hay y el alcance que se tiene, o si va a estar dispar todo el tiempo.
Okay. I think Mr. Berger and Madam Chairman can reply and can answer this question.
Programas hay muchos y foros como estos son un gran espacio. Hoy a las 5 de la tarde hay un foro sobre mejores prácticas en el marco de WISIS, que es el Foro de Sociedad de la Información y del Conocimiento. Raúl nos compartió el programa de Youth, que me parece es una de las iniciativas más importantes para generar awareness e interés sobre los procesos que se tienen en gobernanza de Internet. Y lo más importante es que todos participemos, que aprovechemos estos espacios para efectivamente conocer a los actores, quién es quién, qué prácticas innovadoras se están llevando a cabo en otros países, como nos compartieron el ejemplo de Cuba, el ejemplo de nuestros colegas de Egipto, nosotros cuando compartimos las experiencias de México. Son espacios como este donde aprendemos, donde generamos redes, donde aquellos que tengan cualquier idea, créanme que este es un espacio donde se pueden generar las mejores condiciones para hacer proyectos exponenciales. Y te invito al foro de las 5, donde se van a presentar las prácticas más innovadoras que ganaron un reconocimiento el año pasado en el Foro de Sociedad de la Información y del Conocimiento, a las 5 en el Room 4.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Mr. Loeb from AT&T has to add something to the answer.
I think that the question about digital literacy is so interesting, and I think of it, sometimes I think, Rajan, you know, even in the Indian context, when you have 22 official languages? 26 official languages for the country, the challenges there, even of trying to find a platform for inclusion. So the challenges in different places are significant. One thing from a private sector perspective is how strong the incentive is to encourage digital literacy. Of course, it's a core component of ensuring that these massive investments we've talked about will have a demand side. And so there are many examples you can find. Of course, there is that first moment that Wael talked about of how do you first get people to want to embrace. But once they have, then there's a variety of tools you can use and use in a digital context that can increase the comfort that people have and their sense of security and how to navigate and increase tools. And so we have done that with certain tools around a program called Digital U, and it has had some effective impacts, and I'm sure that there are many other examples from other companies as well.
Thank you.
I think in India, certainly one of the great enablers is almost a push strategy where the government has now had an act in place that every governmental department must have forms on the internet or accessible through the internet, must be all digitized. And so even simple things like booking a train ticket, which obviously the masses use, can be done online. So people are finding out that they don't have to go at 2 o'clock in the morning to stand in line, but they can access this. The government has started these common service centers where you can go and you can use a common facility, even if you don't have the owned facilities, you can have shared facilities. And this is also proving an attraction. And because of this push strategy, people are finding that they must learn, they must access, and of course affordability is already there because service affordability is existing in India.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajan, for this explanation. I think we have another question, the final question, because it is now 12:12, so we have some delay. One question, and I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Pieper, to finalize. But before this question, one question here, and after by the report. Okay. Here, please. Here we have. Excuse me. Here, you have a question there. Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Daniel Orozco García, soy de aquí en México, del estado de Michoacán. He escuchado pues el foro. A mí lo que me interesa, una cuestión de que si en los países donde ustedes son o de donde vienen han reglamentado o han creado una ley para obligar tanto a las autoridades, al gobierno, igual para crear una cultura del Internet, porque se habla de estrategias, protocolos, pero en sí hay una ley o un reglamento que ya se haya implementado en algún lugar.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, can I answer, please?
Sí, México hizo una reforma constitucional muy importante para que Internet sea un derecho constitucional. Somos de los pocos países donde Internet es un derecho constitucional y donde por ley se tiene que tener una política de inclusión bajo la responsabilidad del Estado. Esa política de inclusión es la Estrategia Digital Nacional y también por ley todos los mecanismos digitales de interacción con la ciudadanía tienen que ser accesibles para personas con discapacidad auditiva, motriz y visual. Entonces hay iniciativas muy importantes, por ejemplo, en educación, para proveer de aulas y un nuevo modelo educativo a 3,000 escuelas que garanticen conectividad, acceso a dispositivos y un programa de monitoreo y seguimiento al profesorado para poder tener capacidades masivas de desarrollo de capacidades y habilidades computacionales para una nueva generación de mexicanos y mexicanas que saquen el mayor provecho del acceso a Internet y las tecnologías. Entonces tenemos en México uno de los mejores ejemplos de un gobierno comprometido que a nivel constitucional hace Internet un derecho.
The floor to Mr. Raúl, after Mr. Berger.
Okay, voy a hablar ahora con mi sombrero de uruguayo, no como persona de Internet Society. Si bien no hay una ley que obligue eso, creo que no es la única forma de política pública esa. Y sí, en Uruguay hay unas políticas públicas muy intensas en cuanto a la universalización del acceso. El Estado ha invertido en llevar la conectividad al 100% del país. El 100% de los estudiantes de las escuelas tienen sus propios computadoras para donde están conectados 24 horas y tienen inclusive la enseñanza de inglés se hace desde países desde otros países a través de esa plataforma. Y ahora recientemente hay un proyecto también vinculado a lo que decía Edmond antes, utilizando la experiencia de ese plan educativo, el plan Ceibal, que es para senior people, para personas adultos mayores, que con el mismo criterio. Se le está dando computadoras gratis a los adultos mayores y se les está entrenando en el uso de estas herramientas. Y por último, en cuanto al gobierno electrónico, hay un compromiso de poner, en relación también a lo que decía el ministro de India, el 100% de los trámites gubernamentales a través de las plataformas de gobierno electrónico, y creo que se ha avanzado muchísimo en eso. Todavía no se ha llegado al 100%, pero se está en una etapa muy avanzada de llegar a eso. Gracias.
Thank you very much, our friend Raúl. The floor to Mr. Berger, please.
Thank you. In response to the speaker, I would refer you to the UNESCO website, and if you look for media and information literacy at UNESCO, you will find 3 things. One is some discussions about what is meant by digital literacy, what is covered by that or can be covered by that. Number 2, you will find curricula for teachers, to train teachers about how to teach this media and information literacy, including the digital side. And third, you will find a tool which is very useful for a country to do a mapping as to its readiness to implement a media and information literacy policy. What we do not have, but I would really encourage stakeholders to develop, is more information about how to use the net to teach about the net. Because it's extremely expensive using old-fashioned methods, training teachers in schools across the whole country to deal with these things. We have to develop more cost-effective, more creative ways to build competency, media and information literacy competency about the internet by using the advantages of the internet. And that is still a challenge for us to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you a lot. Now I want to address to my colleague, Mr. Pieper, to tell you that when our friend from Ghana make his question, he asked also about local content and some access to data and open data. I know that in the following session, you have to moderate the issue linked to content. Maybe you have something to tell us before giving the floor to Madame Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, it was great. You also, not only a great question, but as Raul said, you could have been here. And that was one of the points of actually having the conversation, because people who happened to be sitting there, right, know as much as the people who are sitting here, and this is about a conversation. In terms of one of the things is listening to the conversation about capacity building, we kept coming back to content. We consciously, by the way, had the capacity building part of the discussion and then flowing into the next discussion, which is about local content, local language, relevant content, and that kept already coming up. Whether it was, the responding to the earlier question about how do you get people to be interested, and you have grandparents connecting with their grandchildren. That's relevant content, very relevant content. The data, the ability for people to use the internet, to learn about the internet, right? As Guy just said, that's part of the local content, relevant content. And we can't, I don't think we can really separate these things. And so Carolyn is now going to sort of pull out some pearls of wisdom, just some points. And then we're going to move into a focus on relevant content. Because what we're hearing over and over again is this is what's so important. Because if we just have the connectivity and we're not using it, so what, right? And it's the content that makes it relevant and that makes it useful, and it's the content that allows us to benefit from being connected to the internet. And so, also, Yolanda, the questions about the universities and the training and all the programs here, making the internet is a constitution, access to the internet is a constitutional right. These are all interrelated. And these are really, I think, some great points. So, our rapporteur, it's yours.
Great, thank you so much for such a rich discussion. So I'll try to summarize. If there are two words that I would summarize a discussion, use to summarize a discussion, it would be holistic and open-mindedness in terms of approaching the obstacles for inclusive growth. So there are basically three themes. The first one is that there is a need for a more holistic approach to capacity building to achieve the SDGs and inclusive growth. There is recognition that access is the necessary but certainly not sufficient condition to achieve inclusive growth, and that goes right back to what Pepper said regarding the needs for content. So it's the need for both the supply side as well as the demand side. Some of the factors that should be taken into consideration in terms of capacity building, capital and investment are needed to build out both the supply and the demand side. Literacy, the ability for people to enable and understand the content that's online. Technology is sort of a given factor. But one of the things that keeps on coming up a lot is the need for enlightened policy and regulation and legal framework. It ranges from, well, I should say that there is absolute agreement in terms of support from the government to encourage investment. That includes things like universal service funds, tax reforms, encourage innovation, national broadband plans, and then we have two really great examples in terms of Mexico, where there's a law that says internet is a constitutional right, and in Uruguay, where there's a law for ubiquitous connectivity. So it is very clear that an enlightened policy and regulation and legal framework are absolutely necessary for achieving inclusive growth. But the one underlying element in terms of needing this holistic approach is that multi-stakeholder and partnership are absolutely necessary. And as was pointed out by our participant from Ghana, because that gets right at the issue of trust with transparency and accountability. And also what's critical is the need to involve the local communities, local process management. The local communities really need to buy into the benefit that they will be getting. So that's one in terms of a more holistic approach to capacity building. Secondly, there's a need to have an open mind in approaching the issue of capacity building. What was said is that technology is really fundamentally transforming societies and government services. The SDG takes the conversation from a primarily technical conversation to one that is more socioeconomic. And the SDG gives a common platform for understanding what's involved in terms of national development, and therefore the need to have an open mind in how to approach this and achieve the goals. Things that used to work will no longer work. So some of the examples that were brought up in terms of an open mind, there is a need to have a more holistic approach to educating the user and communicate the benefit to each individual user. So UNESCO has an approach about information literacy, where it is about not just about connecting, but also understanding the internet, understanding their rights, and how to use the internet to realize everyone's potential. People need to experience the empowerment personally. So the recommendation in terms of run before walk, communicate the benefit to them, let them know what the empowerment feels like and what the benefits are, so that they can become involved in the process, but also are motivated to get online. New approaches in terms of peer learning. And I would say that the peer learning also applies to all of us, the IGF community, and also the policy stakeholder community that's involved. Take note of what works and the context in which these practices were deployed as well. So a recommendation almost to establish potentially for an intersectional work, best practice, policy options for inclusive growth and capacity building. And then lastly, this was brought up, and I think it's really a critical point in terms of the importance of metrics, not just to measure progress, but also to understand the magnitude of the investments that's absolutely needed to achieve the inclusive growth.
Great summary, Carolyn. Thank you. We're going to move into the next discussion, which is going to focus on relevant content. Some of the people are going to be staying up here, and some people are going to be moving, and some people in the audience are moving up here, so why don't we do that? While we are doing that, I do want to respond to the question from our colleague from Ghana about data. So we had a session yesterday. There's a project called One World Connected, and they have a booth out there, and they have some really great information, and it's looking at at real-world projects and identifying the data that we can use to evaluate, to plan, to diagnose gaps, and it's being led by Professor Yu from the University of Pennsylvania. And there was an entire session called "Where's the Data?" And one of the recommendations from one of our colleagues and participants in that discussion, Alison Gillard from South Africa, was that we need to think about creating and have access to data that's available publicly, so the data becomes almost a public good. I like to talk about a data commons because we need good data to make decisions, to identify what are the gaps and how do we close the gaps. So your question about access to data, I think, is essential. Answering that question is essential as we move forward so that we can do the types of planning and have the understanding that we need to move forward. So thank you for asking that question. So we now are going to move into the discussion on relevant content, language, and what does that mean. We're going to start with Daniel. Daniel, we're going to start with you. You know him from the first panel, the first discussion session on inclusion. And then we'll move to Raul, and then we'll pick up some others. So Daniel, please.
Mientras más local es el contenido, más penetración tiene Internet en la comunidad. Si las organizaciones, los gobiernos y las empresas que no hayan entendido eso, hoy les falta como una parte de la fotografía de cómo se mueve el mundo y cómo se mueve el ecosistema de Internet. Pero no todo es color de rosas. Como les contaba antes, el 62% de la Argentina tiene acceso a Internet, quiere decir que el 38% no. La Argentina tiene 2.200 gobiernos locales, de los cuales 1.000 no tenían conexión a Internet hace un año. el Ministerio de Comunicaciones lanzó un ambicioso plan de infraestructura de fibra óptica para conectar esas 1000 gobiernos locales que no tenían posibilidad de mejorar sus sistemas y estar más cerca de sus ciudadanos y darle mejores servicios. Y a su vez también tratar de generar un proceso de brindar Wi-Fi gratis en las plazas como manera de empezar a generar la reducción de brecha a lo que era la conexión. Pero conexión no es lo mismo que acceso, tiene mucho de trabajar con las economías regionales, en estimular industrias tradicionales que no utilizan Internet, empezar a usarlo, empezar a generar contenido local, contenido no solo geográfico de región, sino local propio de las ciudades o de los pueblos de cada uno, de empezar a trabajar en todo lo que tiene que ver con inclusión y lo que hablábamos antes en la primera parte de este cuento de 3 partes, donde hablábamos de inclusión y cómo empoderar a mujeres y a jóvenes y adultos mayores. Tiene mucho en acercar un puente entre adultos mayores y jóvenes y generar ese bridge entre decir, bueno, cómo utilizan diferentes herramientas de redes sociales para conectarse con sus nietos o con sus nietas. Tiene mucho de acompañar y Internet tiene eso, ¿no? Es generación de comunidad, generación de oportunidades. Tiene mucho de trabajar con emprendedores locales, de enseñarle a gente en diferentes partes de la Argentina que puede vender a más de 1000, 2000, 3000 kilómetros de distancia de donde estaban, que nunca pensaban que se podían extender, no entendían el valor de Internet. Siempre la pregunta es: ¿Internet para qué? Si nosotros, como gobiernos, como sociedades, como comunidad, como sociedad civil, como comunidad técnica, no logramos romper ese techo de Internet para qué, es muy difícil pensar un modelo de inclusión y solo nos vamos a quedar en haber conectado gente. Conectar quiere decir que nos usen, quiere decir que Internet se expanda y para eso es la generación de contenidos. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you. Well, actually, what we're going to do, Raul, sorry for a second, because Megan Richards from the European Commission is here, and she's going to have to leave a little bit early. So I'm going to bump Megan up now, if that's okay, so that you're not going to feel rushed, and then we'll go back to Raul. This relevance question is so important, Daniel, so thank you for raising that, because it does go back to why bother? And it's actually how people are using and benefiting and integrating, you know, in their lives the internet and the applications. So thank you. Megan.
Thank you very much, Bob. I didn't realize I was going to get to go first, so this is a great honor. It's wonderful to be here, of course. I wanted to talk primarily about the importance of local languages in ensuring that local content is developed. Rajan Matthews spoke about 26 Indian languages in the earlier panel. In Europe, we have 23 official languages. I underline official. Those are just languages that are used to translate into domestic law European legislation. There are many other regional languages and local languages, and we have also, in addition to languages in Latin script with funny accents, like, I'm not supposed to call them funny, interesting accents, umlauts, cedillas, accent grave, etc. We also have 2 other scripts, Cyrillic for the Bulgarian language and Greek for the Greek language. So this adds a certain complexity, but what we see is the importance of using local languages and internationalized domain names for ensuring that people have access. Now, I'm using just this as one small example of where we are in Europe and how we're trying to ensure that these additional scripts and other languages are used more broadly. But if you think about providing access to the rest of the world, using other internationalized domain names and using other languages is absolutely a priority in making sure that new internet users can have access, first, and second, that they can develop their own content, because local content is something that we think is particularly important. It helps people take ownership of what they're doing. It drives the digital economy locally and regionally, and it also helps people to communicate better. And then another element that goes with this, of course, is the development of digital skills, which again help if they're in their local languages and local scripts. And I wanted to mention one other aspect, which is that in the new round of top-level domains, which was launched at the end of, let's say, 2004 approximately, a very small percentage of the requests, the 1,930 requests for new top-level domains, were in internationalized domain names or in other languages. So we see that we really need to make a lot of progress there. And then a plug for where I'm going next is a workshop which is specifically addressing multilingualism and the importance of different cultural recognition in access to the net, and it's called Workshop number 19, and it goes until 1:30. So if Bob manages to finish on time, you can still hear the last half hour of that workshop. I think I better stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. And yes, we will aim to stop on time so people can move on to your workshop. That would be, that is, and the point that you just made about international domain names and internationalizing domain names and in other scripts as well is actually a big step forward, because for many years that was not possible. That is now possible. So that was really an important point. Thank you. Raul.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, we know that we have been talking for a long time about infrastructure deployment, but we know that infrastructure is not the only driver for connectivity. Really, the internet has to be relevant for the people. If not, we are seeing in many parts of the world that's where the infrastructure is available, that not everybody is connected, and there are a high percentage of people that is still unconnected. And so one of the factors for making the internet relevant for the people is the local contents. And that's quite obvious, and local content, but also in local languages. And in some countries in Latin America, for example, in Central America, to be more precise, that everybody assumes that Spanish is the language that everybody speaks, but there are a significant percentage of people that speak native indigenous languages, and they are analphabet in Spanish. So if we don't have contents available in their languages, we are just resigning that a huge percentage of the population will never be connected. And the other way is when we talk about contents, it's a very broad thing, because also services are a form of local contents. And government services are the most clear example. And I think that this is one of the things that is in the most easy things to deploy that make really internet relevant for all the people. The interaction with the government is a very key factor for driving connectivity. And the other thing is also, and the colleague Alejandro Pisanti talked to me yesterday about that, since it's very important. It's also opportunities of making money. And so we have very good opportunities in the work that we do, especially in India with our community network projects, where we see that the people that we connect have the opportunity to double their incomes. And some governments that used to have zero incomes now are having $200 incomes per month, what is a significant amount in their context, just providing services to the neighbors, helping them to interact with the government, selling things, buying things, and those things. So, and this is also motivation for connecting the people. It's a way also to local content. And the IXPs that we work a lot in improving the interconnection are very important. That make the content to stay local and improve the cost, but also improve the experience of the users. And so it's about having more contents available in local contents in local languages, and also improving the experience of the users. And this is a virtual cycle, because if we have local contents, better experiences, we have more users. If we have more users, we have more investment. If we have more investment, so we have better infrastructure and so we close the cycle. And thank you. That's time out.
Great. Thank you. Doctor, please.
Okay, so I've introduced myself in the morning. A couple of points that changed a little bit my mindset is that first of all, the internet has a life of its own, so governing it is a big challenge, of course. And the second point is about governments. local governments. And the idea is that governments can be obstacles or can be facilitators. And it's important to have people like my dear friend Hossam Gamal here, who acts as a facilitator between the heavy bureaucracy of the government and the actual working environment. And I'll go into our telehealth program, which talks about content as well as delivery of actual healthcare. So when we looked at our program, we started by going to the underprivileged, underserved populations in remote area in Egypt. And we set up, with the help of the telecommunication sector, an internet, a telemedicine program where we can help these remote areas. And we started producing success. And building on that, the remote doctor, the primary care doctor in the remote area, starting learning on the job while doing the actual interactions with the super specialists at Cairo University. So we added another part, which is an online curriculum. So the doctor will learn some information and he will go on the online. And we coupled that with an awareness campaign to the actual public, written in a local or in a video session, targeting particular diseases or problems in this local area, but with a mindset that we are also, internet is global, so we are looking at exporting this information to other places. And we are working close with the government as well as with the funding communities. So we are liaisoning with people who can fund such structures and attracting them to the program and looking at very well established ecosystems to sustain and progress. And it's becoming quite successful. From 1 or 2 pilot studies, we now have about 40 centers working all together, and we have a demand to expand through the next year all along. So this was just a little bit of a synopsis. So we're tying education, awareness with actual delivery of healthcare, creating and moving forward with the program, expanding it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great example. I was thinking also in your earlier intervention about the healthcare and remote healthcare. That's pretty compelling content, right? Because you're saving lives, right? And that's actually a really compelling reason to be connected and get on.
Yeah, and this, as I said before, when you provide such a program, the government is more enticed to provide connectivity to even more remote areas. Because it's actually, as we worked with Hossam last year, we only in travel money, not medical, we saved about 2 billion Egyptian pounds per year, only travel money.
Only the travel, yeah. That's pretty compelling, and it's based on content.
Rather than the immediate excellent health, there was about, we changed the medical result by 35% in the local community, with no travel, and saving a lot of money. So it's pretty much compelling. But, governments work in slow motion. So you have to keep on having people like Hossam, Abir, to really work along. It's extremely important to have perseverance, because things are not going to happen overnight.
No. And so, exactly. So that's why sometimes I refer to myself, I'm an optimist, but I am a very impatient optimist.
Yes. And an additional part is that when you provide this healthcare umbrella, other people from other nations around you can tap into it. So we're looking now at the Nile Basin. So we already have our provider doctors around from Cairo University. So we're starting to work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to implant in Nile Basin clinics, which will not add any burden to our already scheduled physicians. But you also have to be aware that it's not only what you want to do, it's what others need. So what do they need? What kind of expertise do they need? So it's a very fantastic journey and adventure that I think is got me over here from being a physician looking at patients with small hearts. So
this is great. So really, thank you for coming. Dr. Liu.
Thank you. Thank you for providing me such an opportunity to address the issue of the big data for the Sustainable Development Goals and the local content. We are in the big data society now. Volume of new data created every day. More and more people are involved in the data activities. Since the Sustainable Development Goals issued last year, almost each of the stakeholders are looking forward to developing the data set related with Sustainable Development Goals. Since the goals there are 17 goals and 169 targets and topics, the data are so diverse and so complicated. So no any single organizations can do it all. So it is necessary to develop the data with the local content and using the internet technology networking globally. How to do it? Here I take our experience as a case, so we'll share this experience to you. So first of all, so we need a common understanding by the methodology, top-down methodology. So we work with the group of Earth observation and the IGF World Data System, IGF CoData, and several other international organizations to develop the data sharing principles. So in the year before last year, we worked together in Nairobi, focus on the developing countries. So we issued the data sharing principles in developing countries. We call this as the Nairobi data sharing principles. So this is we got the common understanding. So full and open data for free to share this is for the research communities. We got a common understanding. We know in the data we have 3 parts of the data. One is government data. Second is research community data is funded by the public funding. Third one is private commercial data set. So I am working on the research data. And this is mostly from the institutes or universities. Second one, after we got a common understanding of the full and open data for all, so we need to take the principles into action by bottom-up methodology. So we make sure each of the data set get peer-reviewed, and including all the information, including the metadata, data paper, and the data products, to make sure each of the data set is the original one, accessible, reliable, and reusable with the intellectual property protection. After this, third one, we build up a specific target data publishing and sharing infrastructure. So I have this, I think you have this sheet. In this part, we have the website here. This is a case. So the fourth is the networking globally. Each of these sets, we have this DOI, the Digital Object Identifier, the link to the 35 journal publishers, Web of Sciences, Researcher ID, Geodata Core, World Data System, and the CoData developing countries, infrastructure, and so on. So this is, we make sure each data in the locally content not isolated, but linked, contributed to all the world. And the fifth, the capacity building. Since the data, big data is a new issue in the world, especially we using the training workshops during the last 14 years. You know, in the world, we work with the CoData to set up, establish the task group in developing countries. This is the unique team in the world focused on the data issue in developing countries, lasting for more than 40 years. So we have workshops in China, Mongolia, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, South Africa, and Kenya. And next year, we will have a training workshop in India and Madagascar. From our experience, we realized one, open data will greatly benefit not only the scientific community, but the society all, especially for the developing countries. Second, bottom-up methodology is the necessary and critical issue. So we suggest the UN continue to pay more attention to the local content in the bottom-up methodology. Third one is doing locally, networking globally is the efficient way to help developing countries. So I'm sure if we do this, we will greatly benefit not only society else, but the data contributors themselves too. Thank you.
Sheshe, thank you very much. So yeah, another kind of content is the big data, right? It's the data that we're going to be using, that we're going to be getting the benefits. Great point. Thank you very much. Next is Eric Loeb from AT&T.
Sure, my pleasure. So what I love about Waela's example is it's taking something that is of tremendous impact locally in terms of a fundamental need, and then thinking about the ways with technology that it just bends the curve on productivity in a sector that stands to benefit so much from it, and then it also replicates in other uses. And another example that falls into that, and that AT&T and DirecTV, which we have operations throughout Latin America, and is in the education field. And so I just focus on that similarly in terms of highly relevant local content for a sector that up until very recently has been fairly immune to productivity gains through technology, and that now you are seeing just some incredible concepts, whether it is with distance learning or it is with full MOOC curricula, and again, tailored content that can be very relevant at a local level and to reach into areas where the resources may not be there. We've had this program through DirecTV Latin America, Escuela Plus, and it's deployed in Argentina and Uruguay, Colombia, and Chile. And it's using the pay TV satellite-delivered infrastructure to be able to reach some of the most remote and, in many cases, underserved communities for education with a complete curricula, teacher assistance, student engagement, interactivity. And I highlight it because if people are interested in this, the impact has been really astounding. It's almost 6,000 schools now that are utilizing the curricula, about almost 20,000 teachers fully trained in the pedagogy, and over 800,000 students. And that is something that has been developed from a relatively small team, but using the technology benefits and the scale and the reach and the feedback that we get from the teachers on adjustments they need to the pedagogical material, it can have such a multiplier impact. And so, again, what could be more relevant for local content than education, and incorporating the tools of technology to teach so that you are instinctively comfortable with the technology at the same time. And so that's been a just very exciting experience and project to be involved with.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, and the incremental cost on the technology platform is nothing, right? Because the platform's there, and then the focus on building the content capacity, right? That's great. Yeah, it scales. Yari, please.
Thank you. And just before jumping into the local content piece, I want to talk about a slightly more general problem. And of course, everybody's been talking about the connection of the remaining billions of people to the internet. But as I've been saying this week, that is not enough. We actually need quality and quantity. We need the openness, the local content, the ability of everyone to create services and businesses, no matter where they are. Being able to trust the internet services, not to have surveillance or censorship. And we were talking about basically the quality of the internet from the point of view of the local community, not just the technical aspect of whether you got the broadband. And I think getting the internet to everyone sounds a little bit hollow if it's just about giving access to a global product. The internet is not a cable TV channel from the other side of the planet. People need something that responds to their needs, their local needs, and allows them to create what they need. And no matter who runs various services, getting them in your local language is, of course, crucial. So how can we improve on this? And then there's various responses here. So some of the actions are global, such as the work that we do at the IGF to improve privacy of the technology. We also look at things like, internationalized domain names, power constraints, and many other issues. And we're eager to learn more. We have a research group, Gaia, that's looking at the challenges of a growing digital divide. But there's also plenty to do, not just with like the basic technology, but the implementations of technology. While there's, just to give you one example, while there's often support for different languages in various web platforms or products, many of these services get them wrong. And just to pick on a particular widely used flagship product that you would have thought that is tested well, but it's not necessarily the case. So iTunes give me everything in Danish, not in Finnish or English that I could speak. And there's no reason for that. Maybe they don't have Finnish language for some of their content, and I think Danish is good enough because Denmark is close to Finland, regardless of whether I would actually be able to read or understand that. And if that's a case, one case for one person, but what about the thousands and hundreds of thousands of different products and applications in the world? How well they do that in that space? Probably not so well. Many of the actions are local too, not just global. And I'm not saying that the local actions are necessarily easy either. There are many practical barriers from economics to competition between different things like local content and social media content and so on. But there are technical things that can help, such as internet exchange points that are local, helps you interconnect more reasonably, sea cables, international connections that provide sufficient connectivity, local cloud services that ease the creation of local services. But by the way, we should separate where the infrastructure is from who provides the content, from how well the content matches the local language and so forth. I have some personal content that is in Finnish. It runs on a cheap cloud service in Frankfurt, and that's just fine. There's also regulatory and business environment actions that can help. Removing barriers for people to run internet or content services within the country is of course, crucial. Ensuring competition, supporting media and art communities, and so on. And governments can and should, of course, set an example by providing their own services in the internet, as has been noted here earlier. So in my conclusion, the content is really the king here in this issue. And once again, we find that multiple stakeholders are needed to work together to make progress, ranging from technical to policy and from global to local. Thank you.
Thank you, Jari. That was really, by the way, I love the example of giving you content in Danish instead of Finnish. So we've talked about education, we've talked about healthcare, we've talked about big data, we've talked about all kinds of content. The one type of content, local content, that we actually have not yet talked about, which is one of the types of content that actually draws a lot of people, is entertainment. So we're actually quite lucky. We have a famous Bollywood director here, Bobby Beta. And Bobby's in the audience. This is another example of people in the audience could be sitting here, we could be sitting there. There's really no difference. So Bobby, thank you for being here. And I appreciate your reflections.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I produce content for the entertainment sector, and that's actually 70% of traffic on the net on most countries. And possibly, if that wasn't there, we wouldn't have had this kind of development on the net. So I think we deserve a little bit of sort of focus on this. Now, specifically what's happened is that the internet has become a new kind of delivery system, whether it's OTT or whether it's the YouTubes of the world. But strangely enough, it's the first time in the history of entertainment that the change in the delivery system has actually changed the way content is produced and has changed the way content is consumed. I'm talking about entertainment content now. And that actually has sort of put the entire relationship between content and delivery in turmoil. And while there are some absolutely fantastic things about it, and especially when it comes to local content, I mean, today we have, and India has taken to the net very, very well. So we have sort of 300 million users over here, and most of them are into listening to music in some form or watching, depending on the quality of phone that they have. And the beauty is in all languages. So now local content that was not able to travel because of its size is now able to travel because the promotion, the distribution, everything is happening on the internet, which is a very, very selective and low cost, selective and elective both, low cost way of content traveling. The other beauty is that this content is now traveling to 50 million Indians that do not live in India. And that's a very big one because this is larger than the population of most countries. It is impossible to reach them through cinema. It was impossible to reach most of them through television. Today, it is becoming possible to reach them because each one can make a choice. And you can see the importance of what's happening in India when you realize that Amazon, Netflix, and these companies are in India producing local content today. I mean, they're putting sort of large amounts of money in producing local content, and that shows that, yes, the opportunity is there. I'd like to sort of close this with the one big challenge that we have, that while we've changed the way we produce content, we've changed the way we consume content, what we haven't yet been able to change is the way we monetize this content. And we genuinely believe that unless that part of the equation is sorted, you'll find that the content pipelines will struggle and start drying up, and you'll be left with UGC, which is a very important and interesting sort of contribution of the internet, but that's not the sort of main stake of the entertainment sector. And that will need sort of new ways of monetization, and I think it's forums like this that should give it a focus, and if we can crack that, I think the internet has a long way to go in entertainment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, so two important takeaways, I think, from Bobby, from what you said. One, local content can become global, right? And reaching, 50 million Indians with your content globally, which couldn't be done before, that's a game changer. Then there's the other question, which we're all sort of struggling with, it, not just one part of on the content and the value chain, but also the distribution. We heard earlier, and Rajan's here, from the cellular operators in India, and that is business models, right? The change in the business model, right? How do we finance? How do people pay? How do we consume? These are all things that are changing. That's really important. So we're going to open it up now. We're going to be able to go a few minutes over because we started a few minutes late. So we have our first question intervention from our colleague here from Cuba. And I want to thank you, by the way, very much for your work as we were planning this session. It's been really great working with you. But you have a question for the panel, please.
¿Ya? Ok. Primero que todo, quiero pedir el permiso a Yolanda, a Raúl y a Daniel para hacer mi pregunta e intervención en inglés para que los demás panelistas puedan participar. ¿Puedo? Okay. I'm going to follow on in what Robert just said and also Bobby, the problem of monetization of the content. As you know, in Latin America is one of the areas of the world in which less local content is in the internet. There's a study by Cayorda and Raúl Katz, Argentinians, that says that in Latin America only 26% of the content is local. And it's the lower in compared with other regions of the world, even Africa. So one of the problems is how to finance local content, how to finance the creation of local content, as Bobby said, the monetization. And especially when some of those local content has to be in websites that are free for the user, not pay per view. Because yesterday in the workshop about local content, but mainly entertainment, it was movies, there was other directors there, they have a business model through VHX or some other streaming services that are today that it's true, it's very low fee, but if the content is good enough and have enough viewers, then that way it can finance and recover the investment for the local content. But there's many local content that we want for health or for education or for help agriculture that we want to be free for the user in the internet. We know that in developed countries, advertising industry is so huge that this is usually financed. That's how Google do it and many other ones, through banners and through advertising. But unfortunately, in Latin America and in many developing countries, advertising is not enough for finance. Yesterday, one of the producers of a movie said that she put it first in YouTube and tried to get advertisement to recover the investment. It was not enough. And it was an English-speaking movie or series. So what I ask you, if you can think about what business model could be used in developing countries, especially in Latin America, to finance these applications that need to be free for the users. Application for healthcare, application for social inclusiveness, for education, for all this. We know, for instance, in Latin America, we have an award called the FRIDA Awards. Many of these fantastic applications we have seen in this FRIDA Award, but are made through grants or donations. And the history shows that when the donations and the grants dried out, the applications die, are not sustainable on time, because it's not having a steady stream of income that can serve to be there and to create new ones. So this is my question for the panels. What business model could you think about that?
Great question. Thank you very much. So why don't we see if anybody wants to answer that, and then Alejandro also wanted to have an intervention. But why don't we start with this question first? Anybody? Yes. Please.
I totally agree with you, sir. In my mind, there are three ways that businesses are sustained online or through the internet: either pay as you go, as you said, or a subscription model, or a free model which needs to be sponsored somehow. And whether the sponsor comes from a government or donations or whatever it is, or through sponsors, through companies. And my input, which we use these techniques in our telehealth program, but looking also forward at drying up what happens next. So maybe the first part may be free, and then you go into pay as you go, or in our health sector, maybe through insurance, health insurance, and so on. But the model needs to be individualized. It cannot be across the board. So I enjoyed very much the talk about the entertainment, but it will be completely different than when you tackle healthcare and other things. So this is the secret sauce which makes Facebook or Google or whoever succeed, and in fact make billions of money while we do not actually subscribe to it. So this is $1 million or $1 billion question. It needs to be individualized.
Thank you. Yeah, so what we're going to do, since we're running up against the end, I absolutely want everybody here that wants to respond, right? But try to keep the responses short. But yeah, I agree completely the way you laid that out, right? And this is one of the big questions. We'll go Yari, then Eric, then Raul, and then Alejandro.
Yes, just very briefly, I fully agree that this is a big issue. I just want to make the additional point here that it's not just an issue in say, Latin America. It's a global issue. As one example, the news media in all of the world is struggling with this, and there's difference, or one of the trends is competition between user-generated and professionally generated content, and it doesn't mean that professional content creation goes away. It just means that it has to compete in different ways and transform itself, and we'll have to work on that.
Eric?
So the two comments and questions together are really interesting because they get at traditional business models of sectors, call it the connectivity or telecom sector and the entertainment sector. And the traditional business model assumptions have been so changed in recent years. It's something that the company I'm with AT&T, we've thought quite a lot about, and it actually is the premise of our proposed merger with Time Warner. And it is based on the business models, and it's based on a conviction, a very fundamental conviction. The future of mobile is video, and the future of video is mobile. This is how things are coming together. And the point that gets very interesting in this for these traditional sectors, what are the business models that you can use when you've made a very significant capital investment in order to recover it, and to do so in a manner that is accretive of value to a consumer, a good value? And that gets at the point of what flexibility do you have to try multi-sided business models, so you are not solely dependent on subscription, or on the media side, you're not solely dependent on distribution, but you can maybe blend subscription, distribution, advertising, and have direct relationships between that. So the core to the point, and I think much of this, is that there needs to be a fair amount of flexibility to think about the business models that can be used, so that rather than counting on just one traditional way for revenue, there may be smaller, marginal, accretive ways of achieving what you need to do, and delivering a value to a customer that they can afford in order to consume in the first place.
Raul? Oh, yes. Professor Liu, and then you're just going to go right down, please.
Okay. So from my experience, we have three different business models in the China experience. The very beginning, we used that if you give me money, I developed some content and share. This is a business one-to-one. This is not a good experience in China, but later China saying, no, we don't want to go this way. We want to open and share, and then government investment money to this, and then call the international cooperation, international support also possible. So work together and develop some kind of data and share, but mostly share in China in the second phase. And so why share worldwide? But later, China thinks, no, this is no good. We need it globally. Okay, and then now it's open. It's more and more data is open. Go to the global share, and the government is invest some kind of data, some kind of money, and the same experience in South Africa. And now Kenya is the same. I think this is good for the Cuba to reference.
Thank you. Raul.
Sometimes we have a chicken-egg loop. That's because we don't have bigger markets, because we don't have relevant contents. We don't have relevant contents because we don't have a big market. The government has a role on that. And they have always have a role in promoting local culture and local productions. And this is and also providing their own contents. And this is one thing that I wanted to say. Other things, we have to see the opportunities. Uruguay is a country of 3 million people, and it was, but there are 600 million Spanish speakers in the world, or more. And so far, it has been impossible for movie makers, for example, to reach out this big market. And now it is possible. And I have an anecdote. That's one guy in Uruguay. He published in YouTube a short movie on Friday. He turned off his computer, and he turned on his computer again on Monday, and he had millions of emails because many people had millions of views in his video, and he has a lot of emails of people from Hollywood trying to contact him for being in touch. And the guy now is working as a director as a movie director in Hollywood, and this is an opportunity how we can make our contents available for a much larger market. So it is challenging, but also we have different opportunities.
Thank you, Earl. Alejandro, sort of last word before we go to Carolyn.
Thank you, thank you, Bob. Thank you. In the preparation for this panel, I had the chance to study some of the documents that went behind the work that has been displayed here stellarly by all panel participants. Congratulations. But I have a couple of comments that may still be relevant. First, I have to say I am extremely bothered by the focus on content. We were discussing whether access is king or content is king in 1996. By that time, we also realized that what's king is service. What's king is relevance. What's king is changing state. Content may change state from non-informed to informed, but speaking about content conveys the idea of something passive. It is published, it is there for you to read. It's a content, means there's a container, and there's someone consuming the content. And it doesn't imply the interaction and the service and the change of state. So service, that means, or value add, means someone being able to make a transaction, to pay their taxes, to do something with the government, which is very important, or to make a sale locally. I have an example of a girl who's a student who sells through e-commerce but delivers at the gates of the subway in Mexico City. So she delivers hand to hand and collects in cash. The tax authority doesn't have to know about this. You have government services, you have health. In government services, a discussion we've had with Yolanda, you have to keep the very valuable information that the government has already produced. It's very highly valued by people, and keeping the time series is extremely important. And health, of course, is a great example. We should not be blinded by the content. We should still work very much with interoperability, with accessibility, with all the technical standards, things like moving your content to HTML5 or your services, so that they can be interactive on all platforms instead of having to develop for each or excluding the people who have not renewed their phone to the latest model. Also, in this field, again, not be blinded by the flashy nice things that you can do with apps, when you can also keep the open web and standards that don't require your capacity in your device. And one very brief final point. You should not overextend some of these assumptions. You should look at 2 or 3 things that are going to be demanded, even with passive content. One of them is cloud interoperability. These are very deep technical issues that have a great impact for the producers, especially for the people with low money who are putting together 2 or 3 cloud companies for their services. And the other thing is the ability for users to make mashups. Dealing with a more open environment for intellectual property is key for people to consume, not only to consume, but for people to actually produce this thing. And the final point on the business models raised by Juan Fernandez from Cuba and by other panelists, the money is not there. We should admit that companies are not going to pay for online advertising what they are paying for television and printed press advertising, not for a long while. So the models are also being successful because people are doing with less. Raul's friend used a portable camera and a simple computer to do the editing. He didn't need a $100 million production. That we have to foster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All really good points. Also pulling the technology back and also reminding us that some of the debate, right, is old. But one of the things that was different, I think, is it wasn't just focusing on content as static, but it really is about the interaction and using the content, because integrating it and interacting with it, right, and also becoming content producers is actually the thing that makes the difference.
The name frames it wrongly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. Carolyn, can you make sense from this? Has been a great conversation. So, before we close.
Great. Thank you, Pepper. So, a couple of major points that came out. In terms of, so what everyone really agreed on was the critical need to support local languages and local contents. And here's an editorial point. I think that most of the panelists spoke about IDNs, but I think it's also really critical to be able to support internationalized email addresses, for example. And that's some critical technical work that's going on between both the IETF and ICANN to bring in the technology. So technology has a large component in enabling this. There was also a conversation around the fact that if there are more contents, And allow me to use that term for the moment, and then we'll go back to address Alejandro's point about active content and services. But if more content, or I should say more active services, will lead to better user experience and being able to answer the question of why the internet and what is it for, which can lead to more users and hence more investment. So that's so really the ability of having more content and more localized contents will close that loop, and may actually get us to the point that the challenge of business models. So there's that loop there. And development, so in order to enable the development of localized contents, development of digital skills are then foundational to achievement of the SDGs. So let's bring the conversation back to the topic for this session. So how to drive the creation of local content? A couple different ways were mentioned. One is government services. And again, that's bring us back to the point that Yolanda made at the beginning of the session. Government can be obstacles or facilitators. If it can be demonstrated to government that there are benefits to be delivered, for example, cost savings for healthcare or improved education, then there may be potentially additional incentives for funding more government services. So again, there's a loop there in terms of being able to demonstrate benefits that will bring in additional investments. Secondly, creation of local content can be driven by opportunities to make money, including, for example, local content can become global. Entertainment in local services in local languages is sorely needed. For example, only 26% of the content is local in Latin America. But however, there's question around a supporting environment to enable production of local entertainment, including the whole conversation around what is the appropriate business models. Will there be new business models that should be explored? What flexibility should be allowed in supporting the business models? However, there is also a question in terms of content that are necessary, such as content for health, education, etc. So there's still, I believe that the question of investment needed to produce content is still an outstanding question that needs to be addressed going forward. Thirdly, again, in terms of driving creation of local content, is the ability to share relevant content globally. And here there's an interesting conversation around the fact of being able to share local data more globally. And that's a capability that hasn't been there before. But however, that needs bottom-up methodology as well as platforms. And here, technology becomes a central part of the conversation again. There needs to be an enabling infrastructure for this. If users are going to use the internet, privacy, security, enhanced distribution points such as IXP, interoperability of contents, interoperability of platforms, and open standards are all necessary and critical in order to drive this. And then lastly, and we hear this throughout this panel, is that government has a role in encouraging local content development. However, multi-stakeholder model and process is absolutely necessary, technical and policy and business, as well as in this particular case, local and global as well.
Wow, Caroline, that was great, pulling that together. Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you. We're wrapping up. I'd like to we're going to turn it back to our chair, Yolanda. But I first want to thank my co-moderator, Dr. Youssef. I also would like to thank Andrea. I don't know if she's still here, but who's been working on all these main sessions, making them actually work. And thanking our host country. And you've done great. But I'll turn it back to you as our chair, and really appreciate it. So, and all of the panelists, those are up here, those are who are now sitting in the audience. But thank you very much. Yolanda.
Sin duda, importantes reflexiones. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes por sus ideas, por sus contribuciones. Los invito a seguir aprovechando al máximo este foro, los invito a seguir disfrutando de la cultura mexicana y sobre todo los invito a seguir con este mismo compromiso y pasión que hay entre todos los que estuvimos acá arriba y los que están allá abajo, que al final terminamos siendo actores muy importantes para seguir comprometidos con que nadie se quede atrás del acceso a Internet, seguir comprometidos con seguir promoviendo un uso responsable del mismo y sobre todo con que nadie se quede atrás. Muchísimas gracias por su participación y siendo la 1:25 doy por cerrada esta sesión principal. Muchas gracias.
Could all of the panelists, the people who come up, we'll take a picture together. So those who are in the sitting up, come on up, and we'll come up here by this sign. Back over here by the